It's Friday, July 19th, 2024. Start off as we always do
by worshiping Lord Satan,
among other things. So if you would like to worship Lord Satan, go to churchofsatan.com. If you would like to support our show, I assume churchofsatan.com is the correct URL. I mean, I didn't check it, but hold on, let's see. Why not? Let's see. Let's make sure. I don't want to besmirch the Church of Satan if I don't have to. I don't have a problem with those people. Let's see. Church of Satan. Yes, it is. Welcome to the official website of the Church of Satan. There it is.
Oh, look at that.
Yep,
yeah.
I had it right. Didn't know.
Oh, they got the hoods and everything.
What a great image. You know what? I'll tell you something. One of the things I adore about the Church of Satan is the fact that they don't take themselves too seriously. There is a whimsy to them that is charming to me.
Oh, see, but here's the thing. I think there's two kinds of Satanists. I think there's Satanists that take it too seriously, and there's Satanists who probably have a whimsy.
This is what I'm saying is the official position of the church is, hey, relax. What people choose to do, like all religions, is a separate thing. You cannot.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. The Church of Satan isn't actually about. Well, I think one of them.
It's not evil. It's about
not. Yeah, it's about not having people tell you what to do and doing your own thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. They're not trying to bring about the end of the world.
Honestly, it's kind of a libertarian religion, really.
More or less. Yeah, it does. Yeah, the whole idea is don't do anything that hurts anybody, but other than that, do whatever you want. So yes, there is a libertarian aspect to it. Although what's funny is a lot of the people who I know who are prominent Church of Satanists are not libertarians and in fact hate libertarians. So I don't know what that says. But I don't know. There's obviously,
listen. People like different philosophies at different times of day for different aspects of their life.
No, absolutely.
So anyway, you were saying to support the show.
Like I said, if you're interested in supporting our show, do not go to churchofsatan.com. Instead, I mean, you can go there if you want, but that's not going to support us. Instead, what you should do is
go to wrong.
Yeah. You should go to, after you go to churchofsatan.com, you can go to supportourshow.com, and there you will find resources to be able to support our show. The only one I don't think is there is which I do believe this code does still work, just because I saw something about it, so I think it is still in effect. And actually, there was somebody who asked me about podcasting, so I think that person might actually use it. But you can use the code OZONE, and as far as I am aware, that will still let you get 2 months free on podcasting. I think it is limited to the $30 tier, which is still, for starting out, will be plenty of space because it goes by, I think that's 300 megabytes worth of audio, which if you're just using 96 kilobits, which I don't know why, unless you're doing music or stuff, you would use anything higher than that for voice, then that should be plenty to let you do a number of different things. So yeah, if you're doing music or something else, you're probably going to be encoding at a higher bit rate, so that might be a different story. But I would assume if you're going to do something like that, then you probably already have a bit of more of a game plan than just starting out. So in any event, that code, as far as I know, still works. So you can go ahead and do that. And hold on a minute, what was that noise? Did you hear that noise?
What noise?
There was like a bloop bloop. I don't know what it was.
That's not me.
Weird.
That was on your end.
No, but there's nothing. It sounded like a Skype noise, but Skype didn't do anything. Okay.
Like I said, that's not on my side. So
really, that was really weird.
Yeah, check your shit, man.
No, it's all fine. It's still running. Everything's there.
It's the FBI listening in.
Could be. Hey, what else is new? So,
hey, we have listeners.
Yeah. Well, as long as you're listening, what do I care? Doesn't matter. Yeah. So, busy week in the United States.
Well, I have a topic for us.
Well, I was going to say before we get into it. Normally, I don't care about people dying in celebrity, whatever. But I will say I was sad to see Richard Simmons dying because I always kind of liked Richard Simmons. I always felt like he became a punchline, but I always got a sense of sincerity off him that he really did.
He was a benign individual.
Yeah, and he went along with a lot of it. Like Letterman always was tearing him down on his show, and he always kind of went with the joke. So that was kind of a bummer. But I do respect the fact that he just was like, I'm done with public life, and just left and was like, nah, I'm good. So.
Who was the woman, the sex therapist? What's her name?
Dr. Ruth? Well, Dr. Ruth was 96. She got a long way.
She was old. This is
amazing. Yeah, she made it real far. Well, I guess she was having the correct sex, so good.
And then what's her name died as well.
Shannon
from
Doherty.
The Shining. Oh, Shannon Doherty died.
Duvall, Shelley Duvall, Shelley Duvall and Shannon Doherty are sadder examples because.
Shelley Duvall had a very hard end to her life.
Yeah.
Which is sad because, when I think of Shelley Duvall, I always remember her from was it Fairy Tale Time or something like that?
Yeah,
she was did the intros.
A great show. I remember that.
And then I remember her from Popeye. I know a lot of people she was in Shining. I was like, I always remember her as Olive Oyl.
No, she was the perfect olive oil. Many people have said that, and they're absolutely correct. I cannot imagine anybody else being more that character. Honestly, because the physicality was. I mean, you really didn't have to do much to her. You just had to give her the right clothes and the hairstyle.
Yeah,
you didn't have to
and
do
slick her hair back.
Certainly, you didn't have to give her exaggerated giant forearms to try to make her look like Popeye. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
So she was great.
True.
I mean, those boots she wore were right out of the comic. I remember those boots. They were so amazing.
That is one of those strange movies that it's really kind of it's not great, but at the same time, it is kind of great in a weird way.
It's riveting in its structure.
Yeah, and the design is right out of.
I was going to say, so much care was put into replicating something that didn't work in the movie that it was presented in. Which the artistry is there. It's just the movie doesn't work because they gave it to one of the worst possible directors for a Popeye film. Bafflingly, Robert Altman is just not who you go to for this type of movie. It was so...
Yeah, it didn't know if it wanted to be a comedy or if it wanted to be what it wanted to be.
It wanted to be Annie. That's the thing. They didn't own Annie, and the studio said, what do we have that's like that? That's a period thing where we can put songs into it, and they rushed it, and they just did it. So that's why. It was just...
And, and what's sad is that, I actually do kind of like some of the music from that movie.
I don't hate it. I mean, it's...
No, listen, I saw that movie at a young age.
When you look at the parts, they're good. When you look at it in total, it's not. That's the thing.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure Bluto is the guy is not Fade. What's the other one?
No, Raban.
It's Raban from Dune.
No, not pretty sure. It is him.
It is. There you go.
No, it is.
Yes,
him. He was also the fake out killer in Pieces, the Italian slasher film.
Oh,
because as soon as I saw him in that, I went, "Hey, there's the." Oh,
he's Italian?
No, I don't think he's Italian. He was just in the Italian. It's an Italian slasher that has one of the more famous examples of a woman yelling, I should get the clip, yelling bastard in such an exaggerated way that it's basically jokingly used as a way to show real actresses how to say bastard because it's so over the top. It's like that sound clip I often play where the guy is just going crazy. Yes, this woman's bastard is so over the top that it has
feeling
become
emotional. She's feeling emotional.
Boy, is she. Oh.
So, yes. Yeah. So
anyway, that's what I was going to say. Yeah.
I have a topic. I don't know if Joe wants to talk about it, but I think we should talk about it because it will be affecting us for the foreseeable future, which is how good the game Ascent is.
Yeah. I actually there's a late night that's going to be coming out, and I went on about this game as an example of
stupefied by the fact that it is it is a simple game. By all means. But it is so well done. And
yes.
We came off of Baldur's Gate 3, we came off a game that had very high story content, lots of options, lots of customization to some degree. And then we tried the Far Cry 3 online just to kind of
Far Cry 4.
change things. Far Cry 4 online just to change things. But the online for that is The game itself is not bad. The online setup is not great.
Well, and I am in the background still working my way through that. So once I unlock
yes,
it, we'll go back to it.
so the idea is that like you have to unlock the board by playing the actual game, but then you can't unlock the board by playing it co-op. So it's kind of this weird thing where it's like, well, then I can't play the co-op unless I play the game.
Well,
but what if
specifically, what it is the campaign is not co-op. The campaign story missions cannot be played together. So what you can do is everything else, all the side stuff. However,
but unless
the top half of the map is gated by the story mission. So until you complete that story mission, because I give it leeway because it was their first attempt at doing co-op. So
and we've played their other co-op games, and they were a lot of fun.
Oh, they were riot.
Yeah. But realizing that this wasn't going to work for us, we were kind of scraping around looking to see what there was. And Ascent was actually kind of like I think we both saw it on different lists, and it was like neither of us knew this game. We both thought, what the hell is this?
I knew about it, but I don't generally like twin-stick shooters. So.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, I don't think I've ever even played a twin-stick shooter. Like,
I haven't. I did when I was much younger.
Yeah. And so it's really, I mean, probably not. I think I've played twin-stick shooters like on an actual, in an actual arcade. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Smash TV is the only one I ever really remember playing. That's
so but this game it is I don't consider it to be a complete game in my mind, only because coming off of Baldur's Gate 3, I want that you want that the personality of the characters, you want the close-ups, you want the dialogue, you want that extra piece. But this is like if you took that aspect of Baldur's Gate out, and it was really just all the battles, but not turn-based. It was an actual shooter. And it looks amazing. Like the cityscape that you wander through is so meticulously well done, and it is such a mix of every sci-fi movie and property that I can think of. We've seen Blade Runner, we've seen Ghost in the Shell, we've seen Akira. Who else? We've seen
Total Recall.
We've seen Total Recall. We've seen Matrix. I mean, there's so much stuff, and then there's references to the actual books, where it's like you have a bartender that looks like Rats from the Neuromancer. You have a bar that's actually called Rats. There's lots of you have a deck. You use a deck to be able to hack systems the same way you do in Neuromancer. Like, obviously, the people who made this game had a profound love of cyberpunk and sci-fi. And it's all there. And what's funny is that there's points in the game where we find ourselves running really long distances, mainly because we keep forgetting that we can use a taxi service to get around. And you kind of get mesmerized by some of the landscapes because they look so good, and they're so well done, and they've designed them to look so lived in, and they've got people running around and people doing things, and it just, like, for me, the game has such a rich backstory of a world that I just start filling in the narrative myself because it's so engaging. Now, the game itself is fairly simple, which is that you're running you're basically like a mercenary for hire at the lowest totem pole. And I do like that it starts with your corporation going bankrupt. Like, I think that's pretty neat. So your corporation that you are essentially in serfdom for goes bankrupt, and you are now a free agent. And it basically is you steadily grabbing bigger and bigger work and working your way out of the slums, right? And in doing so, you're basically just running around this mass. Is it a city or is it a space station?
Oh, that's a good question. It's called an arcology, so I believe it is on a planet.
It is okay, so it's like a super tower, like a mega city then type thing.
Yeah,
okay.
I think that's the idea.
So you're slowly working your way up the mega city. And I mean, every time you go to a new floor, there's new interesting aspects. There's so much neon, and at the same time there's so much dirt. Like, they really took the idea of the high-tech lowlives and threw it together so well. And there's so many references. I mean, we saw the Total Recall chair at one point in a room randomly as we were running by. I mean, it's just all there. And the game itself is simple. So it's a twin-stick shooter. You're running around. You're upgrading your armor. You're getting bigger and different guns. And you're blowing your way up through this shit. It reminds me of games like Contra from when I was a kid. I don't know if those listening would remember Contra, but Contra was like a Nintendo and then a Super Nintendo game. It was like two Rambo looking guys just running across a two-dimensional board shooting at aliens and things like that, right? I spent many hours of my life playing that game with friends, especially on like a 2-player on the TV. This game has that kind of sense. If I was a like 15, 16-year-old kid, I'd love playing this game on split screen with a friend of mine or online with a friend of mine, and I still do. That's what Joe and I are doing. So it is, the game itself is simple. And I think that's what makes the backgrounds of it so much better, is that the game is simple enough that it gives you time to admire just how beautiful it is. And sadly, I don't think the company, is it Neon Giant? I think it's called Neon Giant.
It is.
They were bought.
The developer is Neon Giant, yeah.
Yeah, they were bought right after. This is the only game they ever put out as themselves. They were since bought, and who knows if they'll ever make a game again, or if they've just been bought and stripped for parts or absorbed into some larger company. Who knows? But, I mean, you said at one point, if this was the only game I ever made, I'd be pretty proud.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I said. Is okay. You don't ever if you don't ever make another game under whatever the Neon Giant thing, which probably they won't because they're part of a South Korean publisher called Krafton. Hey, whatever, you made this, and I've heard good things about this game all along. The reason I never was really gonna touch it was because it was a twin stick. But it's not that I didn't see great reviews and had been read that the soundtrack and everything else. And
the soundtrack is fantastic.
Soundtrack is great. Yeah.
So Joe and I played for a few nights. Probably played for like 4 or 5 nights. At which point, both of us were like, "We got to get this soundtrack." I heard it on, I heard it on iTunes, and as soon as I heard it, I was like, "Oh, geez!" I was like, "I need to buy this." I was like, they got the same guy to do the soundtrack. He does the DLC soundtrack, which is a little faster. And then that guy's music itself is quite enjoyable. I can't find his name, though. What was his name?
Oh, I can't pronounce it. No, I can't.
Well, yes. If you look for the Ascent soundtrack, the guy who does it is very good.
It's like Powell something, and I can't.
Yeah, it starts with a B. I remember it starts with a B. Yeah. Actually,
it'll be. I'm going to link in the show notes to the page for the game, and it is on there, so you can find it.
Hold on.
I did look, and the studio still exists under Krafton. There are some studios that were bought and folded, but that one is still considered active.
I think it's Blazkak.
Sure.
Or is it Blaz? Because, oh man, there's a lot of Z's in there. Okay, no, I can't pronounce it either.
That's what I mean.
Blazczac. Oh, that's a tough one. Okay, no, I can't do it.
Yeah.
You were right.
Okay.
Yeah, but I wanted to bring it up because we hadn't talked about it at all, and it's actually been really like just really refreshing to play it. It's a complete different feel than Baldur's Gate. Like we were looking for something that was kind of less demanding to play, and for a game that is kind of story-wise, it's less demanding. I don't even care what the story is. I just need to have people tell me to go shoot things and then go just wander through this beautiful city and shoot things. They control the camera angle and it moves around to give you these really beautiful setup shots. Normally, I don't like the fact that I can't spin the camera around myself and have my own kind of point of view, but they control it in the game and it is stunning. I mean, some of the stuff, and then every time I'm starting to get kind of bored with what I'm looking at, they'll shift it in some way and I'll be like, oh, it's gorgeous. Like that was that one floating almost engine looking thing that we walked up to, this giant, and then all of a sudden the camera shifted so that we was like right behind us and it was just us going right up to this thing. Or we keep finding buildings that belong to other movies. Like we found the Blade Runner police.
Yeah, the Blade Runner police station where they the ship
that was there. So, and there's flying cars everywhere and shit like that.
And there are spinners. There appears to be spinners on there.
Yes, I'm sure there's references that I don't even know. There's just so much shit packed in there. It's and at the same time there's like bits of Mass Effect in there. There's bits of all this other stuff that you love. So it's man, like I don't think I've ever played a game and then immediately thought to myself, "Geez, I wish these people did more." And the DLC is the only other thing that they put out. So I will be curious how this kind of game progresses if we get bored of it because it's if the shooting aspect gets repetitive. Although it seems to be getting harder as we go, so it's not like it gets easy. And what they did, if the DLC is a change of pace, or is it just kind of like more of the familiar? You know what I mean? But there is enough variation in the weapons to kind of make it fun. And man, the way that some of these weapons affect the enemies is brutal. Because I know I have a gun that causes people to explode, and not explode in like a oh look, there's a burst of blood. Like they literally just like swell up and burst. God, it's I want to zoom in. Do you ever have that in this game where you just want to zoom in continuously?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I wish I had the ability to kind of get way closer to see the details. But that's how they can do it. They can keep it as cool as it is because they don't have to make it as detailed. They have to trick you from afar, So in that respect, they know the point of view that they can control, which is very smart. So that is the Ascent. I love it. I think Joe loves it.
Yeah.
And
yeah, like I said, I talked about it. There's a late night coming out where I spotlighted it as one of the surprising things for me in the last couple of years has been playing games that the types of which I never expected to play, and this is one of them. If you told me years ago, oh, you'll don't worry, you'll find a twin stick shooter you like, I'm like, no, I won't. I just don't like it. I don't like that format. And sure enough, well, same thing with Baldur's Gate, sword and sorcery, isometric. 5 years ago, no. Are you kidding? Please. Not only does isometric suck, but swords and sorcery is fucking boring. And yet, here we are. So,
yeah,
the game is good. That's all.
I really wish that Blade Runner 2077 was co-op. If they could make it co-op somehow, like I would.
Oh, you
I
mean
think
Cyberpunk 2077?
Cyberpunk, yeah, Cyberpunk, Cyberpunk 2077, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, but this game feels like
it's close
aspects
to
of
what that is. Yeah.
It's just it's just a shooter. Yeah.
Right.
So.
Yeah. No, it's great.
I don't know. I don't know where the hell.
It reviewed very well, so I'm not really surprised. I think it was just the surprise for me is that I like this type of game because I generally don't, and that's the thing is,
if it didn't look as good as it did, listen, if it didn't look the fact that it looks as good as it does.
Well, it's everything. It's everything. The combat loop is satisfying. So it's we talked about Outriders. The story sucked.
Oh yeah, well the story was terrible, but the combat was hilarious. Yeah,
and this is that, but they've bolted on one of the most exceptional blendings of a lot of different science fiction and cyberpunk influences in a way that doesn't feel lazily checking boxes off.
No, it's all mixed in there. You don't just walk by nicely.
A spinner. It's like, okay, that's from Blade Runner. We get it. It's the all of it, the totality of it. Even the music is blends of different types of music where you recognize and go, oh yeah, okay.
Oh yeah. So the main theme, I've realized there's a lot of Ghost in the Shell in there.
Yeah, the choral parts.
Yeah, it's good.
And the way they use like that ringing sound. I don't know what to describe it as, but if you've heard the opening to Ghost in the Shell, you know exactly what it is. In between the vocal parts, there's a sound, which I don't know what it is. It sounds like almost like ringing bells or something at a high pitch. I don't know what it is. But there's that sound is in that soundtrack, and it's sprinkled, and they're using the voices. So but it also has very Blade Runner aspects to it, where there's these kind of very synthesizer Vangelis stuff going on. It's all of it. It's mixing a lot of things together.
I don't often play a game where I kind of just want to wander off. And I don't even need a mission at first. I just want to wander off and see what see what there is there, because
you remember at one point I said, "Hey, come over this ledge. Look over this ledge."
Oh yeah,
because then the camera this is what I like too is that you just stop and eventually after probably about 30 seconds the camera starts to move because it understands that what you want to do is see more of it. So when you stop,
it shifts in a little bit.
It moves itself. Yeah.
Oh man, it is so good looking. So
that's great.
Yeah, I figured we'd talk about it because we're gonna be playing it for a while, and
15 to 20 hours. It might not be as long as we think.
Oh, is it really short?
I think it's 15 to 20 hours is the.
Oh shit, we're 5 hours in already.
That's not bad.
That's funny.
Okay, we're also not rushing through it.
No, we're not. We're getting we're taking our time.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So they say.
Yeah, at one point, I was trying to log in and I was having trouble logging in, and I could see my character, and I was just standing there, and the game was like having trouble loading it, for, like joining us up, and I keep seeing Joe's character running back and forth, and like running out of view, and then running back and forth, like running out of view, and finally I got through, and I'm like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, I'm looking at the city. He's like, I'm looking at the center column, all the shit there, and like, you know, it's just so good looking. So
that, by the way, team of 12 people made this game.
I thought it was 11. Sorry, I thought it was 11.
Well, the thing I just read said, but still, that's nothing for...
But 12 people. I mean, 12 people made this game. It is beautiful.
Right.
You know, it's beautiful. It's pretty fluid. It's not, you know...
Yeah.
The people who made this are clearly very smart, and they loved what they were doing. So, and it's not often you play a game where you get that feel. Like, if think about it, what's the last small team game we played? Because Baldur's Gate was huge.
What is the last? Okay, let's think.
Small project game.
A small project game.
Because I can't think of one that, like, the last small project game I played was probably Journey.
I mean, that we played or that I played?
No, I'm saying that I'm sure you've played a ton, but I'm saying that
the ones that we
I can't
together?
think of one that we've played, like a small, unless Sniper Elite.
No, yeah, that's a good question. Is how big is that developed? That's Revolver, I think. Or is that Revolver?
They don't seem like a very big team.
Yeah, maybe not. Let me take a look. I can't remember the name of the group that makes that, because they did make their own. They don't have their own engine. So let me see. So Sniper Elite is made by who? No, it's not. It's not Revolver. What is it? Rebellion Games.
Yeah, Rebellion Developments.
Rebellion Games.
Let's see. How big are they?
Here we go. British video game developer. 475 employees.
Oh wow!
That's
Is that big or is that small?
Well, it's bigger than Ascent.
Oh, bigger than 12.
Listen, game developers can have thousands of employees. Rockstar, I think, has quite a few.
That's what I'm saying. Are they considered small by comparison?
A Rebellion?
I mean, Ascent is 12. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, it's 12.
That.
So.
Yeah, that's the thing. So I want to look at okay, I'm looking through our video games, seeing if any of these look like small developers.
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either. Not that I can see. Not compared, nothing to the extent of what we're talking about. The smallest, the Saints Row guys. Hold on. I don't know how big that team is. Saints Row was made by... Oh, no. Okay. Well, THQ is the publisher. Who's the developer? Let me look. Because THQ is a huge company. Or it was. Volition. Volition is the name... was the name of the company. They're gone now. Let's see. They had 236. So that's smaller than Rebellion.
That's what keeps... that's what keeps baffling me. It's this whole idea of 12.
Yeah. Whereas, let's see. So let's look up what Call of Duty. Who do they have? I don't remember. I think it's
Call of
Treyarch,
Duty is
maybe?
like thousands. Yeah, it's Treyarch. Well, Treyarch manufactures.
Okay, the current one. Let's look up Infinity Ward. I've heard that name.
Yeah.
It just says 250 plus. That's interesting. Treyarch has 300. Okay,
plus.
so no, that just says 300.
Oh, really? Treyarch?
Yeah.
Wow, I thought Treyarch was bigger than that.
Well, so that tells you. So actually, compared to the Ascent is the smallest game we've played.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me see. How many does Rockstar have? So maybe they're around 2,000. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Go. Yeah.
So, yeah. So, and also nothing as small as the set. Nowhere close.
Some of these large companies also outsource big pieces of their game.
Oh, absolutely.
Which thus,
I mean,
it
Deus
makes
Ex, Human Revolution famously outsourced its boss fights. That was why they sucked so much when it first came out.
Oh, did they really? Why would they do that?
Because they ran out of time. This is the other problem. Because you have to meet the deadlines, whether you can do it humanly or not.
No,
so
I know. Of all things, like the boss fight of a game can be the most annoying part of it, and to outsource that.
Well, it wasn't that it was annoying. The thing is that the rest of the game in the original version, they've since patched it.
Yeah.
Not the smoothest patching, but it does fix it enough. All the rest of the game, you don't have to kill anybody. Boss fights, you have to. So it broke one of the essential parts of the idea was, if you want to do a no-kill run, you can't. And they recognized it so significantly that those kills don't count for the game, or did not
really?
count. Because it wasn't fair. You couldn't not kill them. So you can't blame somebody if they've not killed everybody, and then the game says, no, you have to kill this person. They then patched it where you could not kill them, or I think indirectly, I think you knock them out, and and you can make it difficult. But the thing is, they made it impossible, and then so people said, "Well, this isn't fair. How can I have a no kill run if you make me kill somebody? You've taken away," especially because the rest of the game is so built around choice. And then when you get to the boss fight, you just have to empty bullets into them. Not only was it boring and significantly downgraded from the rest of the experience, but it also forced you to not act the way you wanted to. You could trank every other person in the game. Get to them, you can't. Even, like Metal Gear Solid 4 made it difficult. Trying to no-kill the bosses is not easy in that game because the amount of tranquilizers you have to hit the bosses with takes a long time. I've done it. It takes a while. And it's not always easy to even do it, but you can do it. It's easier to just shoot them, but if you don't want to, that's fine, but you're going to work for it. Whereas this game said, nope, you don't have an option. Everything else that you've spent all this time, and I mean, I spent hours going around different things to avoid killing people, one map. Then you get to a boss fight, and it's like, no, you have to blow them up. Oh, great. Well, this is a game that, especially because the whole foundation of immersive sims, one of them is Deus Ex, the idea that the game doesn't tell you how to play. The game allows you to get through it however you want. So, and I know somebody's going to say, well, in the original Deus Ex, you had to kill Gunther. Yeah, you did, but that was also a much different time. That's in the year 2000, which is now 20 plus years ago. In a modern setting, you can figure it out. And technically, you can indirectly kill him by just activating his kill switch by saying a word to him, which you didn't put that in there. You're just activating it because basically he's forcing you to kill him. You could avoid killing everybody else. In the Human Revolution, you could not avoid killing anybody. So it's a distinction, certainly. Semantic, perhaps, but when a 20-plus-year-old game allows you to be more non-lethal than a modern one, there is a problem, is all I'm saying.
Well, it always comes down to the fact that you want the true end goal of a game is to allow people total freedom to figure out how to win on their own, right? Which is something that, it would take great...
In this game's example, yes. Yeah, if you're
I'm saying in general. In general, the end goal is to make it so that you can creatively figure out any number of ways to figure out a solution.
No,
right?
no, it is not. That is not always the idea. But
No. I'm saying evolution-wise, like as the evolution of games goes, like these open world games, to some degree, they're going to have to keep upping the ante of the options that they give you. Do you know what I mean? Like,
well, it depends. If the goal of your game is to tell a very specific story, because I told you about that game, Jesus, what is it called? Spec Ops: The Line. That game is designed to make you realize that you are playing as a monster. So in that game, choice is an illusion. And you have very little choice because in the end, it is meant to make you think about what a person's role in a war is. So even in an open world, you can say, no, you only have certain options. So that the open world idea can be an illusion if it serves the story.
Oh, I mean, and sometimes they want it to be open world, and if you find the rail, then it's very easy to. At that point, it's very hard to go back to this kind of fantasy of, oh no, it's an open world. You're like, nah, not really.
Yeah, and
Dragon Age. Dragon Age had that problem where they wanted to present like an open world, but there is very much a rail to that story, and the second you tried to move off that rail, you realized, oh no, you are on a rail. I was like, they just forced the perspective so it looked like you had options.
Well, open world is also a broad term. Baldur's Gate 3 is a open world, but it really isn't. You cannot literally go anywhere, but you can go anywhere within the paths laid out.
There's a lot of options, but you're always on one of their roads. Yeah.
We avoided, both intentionally and not, big fights at times. Like that hallway fight, we didn't do that the first time. The game did not penalize us. We simply never went down that route because Shadowheart wasn't with us. So we never got that big thing where she confronted her people or whatever. And
the was it the Tower of Grim? What was it?
Whatever it was, the Tower of Pain or Misery,
whatever.
Or whoever.
Yeah, the sadness place. Yeah,
where
we got the shit kicked out of us the first time. Yeah,
right. But we never did the first time through. We never did that.
Yeah,
fight.
and honestly,
so.
I'm so happy we got that on the second playthrough because we were smart enough then to be like, okay, we've had our asses whooped. I was like, how do we ruin these people?
Also, how about the thing where we ran into Raphael's concubine? We never did that.
Oh yeah, that was weird.
We completely missed that room.
I'm very curious now if I how far that would have gotten if John Bar Jovi would have just ended up banging the concubine. And the fact that Raphael has a succubus whose only job is to look like him.
Oh, it's perfect.
Like, it's just so fucked up.
It's beautiful. I mean, it's so fitting of the character.
I know, but that's what I mean. Like, but even Baldur's Gate, it has a rail. It just has many, many rails.
Yeah,
you know
and that's what I mean about open world is kind of it's not a great term because it is so flexible that you really can't even apply a meaning.
Well, because we want freedom in our games. We want freedoms to do things the ways we want to do them, and the game developer is trying to give you the illusion of it. I mean, Ascent does that. Ascent is trying to give you the illusion of, hey, man, you can go anywhere. Look how big this city is, but you're not going anywhere. Your map is very limited to the size of that city that they expose you to. But
we can do whatever missions, except for ones that don't indicate you can't do them, and then you find out because you can't open a door. So,
But the cityscape is there to make you feel like you are, in a different environment. Yeah, it's the same thing with like Rainforest Cafe. Remember the Rainforest Cafe?
Oh, sure, I love that.
The Rain Cafe, it's a restaurant that was there to make you feel like you were not just sitting in a mall or sitting in a building. It was there to provide you with somewhat of you're eating, but you're kind of outside at the same time.
Still exists.
Ooh.
Wow.
Is it really? That's amazing.
Yeah, where is it? Let's see.
We used to go to those. We used to go to that one in
Atlantic
college all the
City.
time.
Hey.
Oh God. Okay.
Atlantic City, Disney, Texas, Michigan. There's only a few left, but they're mostly in tourist traps.
I hope that they're good though. Like, at least if you're gonna have a few left, really jam it up.
Wow, there's one in Abu Dhabi. Huh, that one's probably nice.
What?
I bet you that one's not. Yeah.
Fuck?
Niagara Falls still has one.
Oh,
Paris, France,
hey,
Tokyo.
No way.
Yes,
Really?
Malta.
Paris has one.
Paris, France.
That feels.
Oh, you know why? Disney Village in Paris.
Oh, okay.
So that's why.
Makes
So
sense,
yeah, so it's probably very nice.
Did you read about that restaurant that the South Park guys bought?
Oh yeah, that was.
And they turned it into this like
bizarre.
weird it's like a whole event place with like cliff divers and an arcade and it's like a weird Mexican food place.
That is one of the stranger stories I've ever read.
Yeah, apparently they grew up with that place and they loved it.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's one of those things where, look, if I had the money and funds, I would have preserved the Nathan's place that I went to as a kid that had the restaurant and the arcade.
Okay, so if you could have a restaurant. No, if you could have a restaurant, any restaurant that you loved growing up, and you could relocate it so it was near where you
Nathan's.
lived. So
Nathan's. That's it.
Just
Nathan's
interesting.
that I went to. Mm-hmm.
Because for me, this is kind of like a side thing, but do you remember Mexico in what do you call it? Epcot Center?
Oh yeah, Epcot. Yeah. Well,
What is it?
I don't know if they call. You're talking about the.
What is the rest of the name? Epcot. Is it Epcot Center or what is it? Epcot.
I believe it is Epcot Center. Yeah, I think so.
So right. in the Epcot park, it's supposed to be next to Disney. You go to the different countries, right? And I knew we've talked about this before, but there's like a Mexican, like almost like pyramid temple looking place, and when you go inside of it, at first you're in like a museum of like relics from like Aztec things like that, and then you go through these back doors, and suddenly you're in this simulacra of a Mexican small town night garden. And there's like the sky is really like they have like warehouse high ceilings that are all painted to look like nighttime with stars, and there's like all these little outdoor shops and there's a little restaurant there. And growing up, I fucking loved that place. I loved this idea of suddenly being transported from a 95 degree 100% humidity Florida to like this cool Mexican evening surrounded by plants, and there was never like a lot of people in there. It was Epcot. It was always had a smaller.
There's a page dedicated to it. I will link to it that has all the stuff.
I loved that place growing up.
Is this? Hold on. Is this? Make sure this is it. I believe this is. I don't remember ever going into it. I remember seeing.
Did
you
not? It was very easy to miss it because it didn't look like anything.
I remember seeing the outside of it because it did look.
Well, the outside just looked like a Mexican temple.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's why I liked it, but we never went into it.
Oh man, and I think that's what it was. Is that a lot of people just didn't go in because when you first walked in, it just looked like a museum, and then you'd walk through the back door, and they had a little silly ride about the history of Mexico that you could ride on.
Actually, you know what?
Yeah,
I'm looking at the inside. I think we did go into this. I remember this now.
I just loved that place because
Yeah.
it was just such a strange
Well,
feeling
listen,
of
I
transport.
said
You know,
years and years and years, Epcot was always my favorite thing. Always. Far and away, Epcot was, because it was supposed to be futuristic. Do you know what Epcot stands for, by the way? I never knew this before. Epcot stands for Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow.
Oh, okay, that makes more sense.
That's all. I remember that ride when you went inside and it had all the models. They've replaced it now, but I remember the original version of that when I was younger. That was like the coolest thing. I always loved Epcot. I always thought it was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, actually, this does raise an interesting question for me because, we're talking about Ascent and we're talking this cyberpunk vision of the future and stuff like that. But the fascinating thing is cyberpunk is actually a dream of the 80s, right? So we have essentially proven some of cyberpunk right, and we've proven some of it wrong, which is always what happens, right? In fact, I found something I was going to send you. I thought you'd find really funny. I'll get back to my thing, which is that there's somebody put a chart out of where we are living inside science fiction movies. So we are currently between Soylent Green and Children of Men. Clockwork Orange was 1995. Escape from New York was 1997. 2001 was 2001. Free Jack was 2009, right?
Oh, Free Jack.
Postman was 2013. RoboCop was 2015. Back to the Future 2 is 2015. Running Man is 2017. Rollerball is 2018. Blade Runner is 2019. And we are currently between Soylent Green, which is 2022, and Children of Men, which is 2027. So that's where we are on the futuristic movie timeline. After this, we have 12 Monkeys in 2028 to look forward to, along with 2032, which is Demolition Man. But
I'll tell you what. The
yeah.
one thing from Demolition Man I'd love to get here sooner rather than later is the whole thing where if you get into a car accident, it fills with foam.
Oh, I used that in my book actually because I was like,
logically
that would be great. Yeah, like in my book I call it instant foam, where basically it's like a really squishy foam for just a few moments for your impact, and then it just like falls and dissipates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Oh. So what I was thinking about was this idea that, we don't really have a present-based vision of the future. Like, a lot of our futurism right now is a throwback. Like, Star Trek is a vision of the future from, like, the 70s and the 60s, right? Cyberpunk is a vision of the future from the 80s, right? What is our actual present vision of the future?
I always thought Minority Report was a pretty present one.
Like, well, no, that's what's it called? That's Philip K. Dick. That's 70s, 80s.
What the movie did was it modernized.
I know, but the idea, the core idea, like we haven't really had.
Oh, you mean? Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
The 2000s.
Sadly, probably Ready Player One.
Yeah, that's what I mean, right? Like, what
Which
is
makes sense
our?
Because we live in a garbage culture.
Yeah, 20 years from now, or 30 or 40 years, someone looks back, they're going to be like, oh, what was the vision of the future that the late 2000s, 2020s was going to offer us? Like, what was their genre? Because it's like you had Star Trek, and you had Star Wars, you had and then it went to cyberpunk, and it's like, well, what comes after that?
Well.
Is post-apocalyptic like our genre of the future?
I don't know. I mean, well, I don't know. Blade Runner 2049 kind of feels like it would be, that type of thing. That's an updated version of. I mean, everything's updated of something else.
Yeah.
They're still using friggin' jetpacks, and that's from the Golden Age. So.
Yeah, because listen. The reality, I hate to say this, is that jetpacks will never work. Because strapping
not the way they've been traditionally presented.
Strapping a rocket to your back and having the damn thing just shoot out your back is like, at least the Rocketeer tried to bring it into reality by going, well, the fin on your helmet helps to guide, but it's
except that his legs would burn off. I mean, that little plate, that ain't stopping a jet like that. Come on. I mean, that is one of the simultaneously coolest looking and most ridiculous
impossible
ideas. You would have no legs. If you've had your torso amputated, you'll be fine. Anybody
Yeah.
else, screwed.
Yeah, so I was thinking about the other day, like, what is our vision of the future? Because, like, I'm writing a near future book, and the components that I apply to my near future, right, are overpopulation, more intrusive technology, more cameras,
No,
more
I do believe
smart,
there
more.
are modern versions that interpret a future. Devs would be an example. Devs is a wholly kind of modern, near future idea because it's very focused.
Yeah.
On the idea of simulation.
You think? Well, I'm saying is do you think simulation is our thing? Is that what we will add to the mix? Is it simulation? Is it virtual? Like, what are we?
It's hard to say because.
Well, you don't know when you're living in the age. I know.
Well, not only that, but it's tough to tell. Some things that are seen as kind of classic elements of science fiction, I don't know if they are truly classic elements of science fiction. So, for example, the idea of artificial intelligence is not new, but at the same time, the ideas of many of the people who came up with the kind of defining ideas are not realistic. Whereas now that we have it actually happening and we're seeing somewhat of what it's developing as,
and I got to tell you,
it's going to inform it better.
I did the college I did that college course about technology, and she started talking about artificial intelligence,
right?
And I realized how dated the course was at that moment, because she talked completely about she was trying to talk about the arts, but she ended up talking mostly about the way that machine learning was affecting like chess players and like and things like that, where it's like you suddenly have these chess players who are being destroyed by machine learning type systems, and the game Go. Have you ever played Go? It's a Chinese game.
Yeah,
it's apparently one of the. Man, I never even heard of this game. I was like, I should try that.
Okay, I'll just tell you. I really only started playing it after I saw Pi the first time, and I was like, ooh, that sounds like a fun game.
Okay.
And I realized how bad I was at it.
Yeah, because there's so many combinations, right? So apparently
I'm not good at tactical thinking. That's why I'm bad at chess. I love the idea of chess. I can't play it because I can't think 3 moves ahead. I can't.
The computer has gotten good at Go as well now. And so she's talking about all this, right? And she comes to these very positive conclusions where she's like, machine learning, I guess, was it Kasparov said that after he lost to a machine, to a system, he basically was like, I need to get better. And then there was a whole thing in there about how, he was playing against computers on and on to see if he could get himself to improve himself beyond them. And that is, I guess the same thing is happening in China with the game Go, where you have all these players who are playing the computers to try and because the computers are kind of coming at it, and they're bringing sort of unilateral thinking that humans haven't had to do because they've been playing other humans. But when you're playing something that is not necessarily human, your tactics change. But what annoyed me in this course was that she starts talking about how she hopes that machine learning will, instead of like giving us fear, will actually like drive people to be more creative and to create more, works of art and things like that. And I was like, yeah, but at no point did she touch on the fact that the thing I think is going to be a thing in the future is this idea that a lot of companies want to outsource art and writing to machine learning so they don't have to fucking pay people.
Okay, but I actually agree with her, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
The whole thing about why these systems and these computers are so good at chess, Go, all this stuff. Computers and artificial mechanisms are always, whatever you want to call them, algorithms, whatever. These tools are always going to be better than people at closed systems. Meaning, even though Go has a million outcomes,
it's still
it is
strategy.
finite. Yeah, you still have there is a limit to how many variations there can be. Period.
Yes.
There is. It's a very high number. I don't know that a human could necessarily know them all, but a computer could. Chess is the same thing. You can only move so many ways. The goal is always the same. There are only so many moves. Period. What changes is what is outside the bounds of these tools, and what they cannot match is creative interpretation, thinking beyond the boundaries of whatever it is. You can't do that with chess.
That will still be there on a higher level. But it's what I'm worried about is when these companies are like, hey, we need a picture of a rabbit wearing a pirate hat. Just throw it through the algorithm.
Yeah, but okay, and that is the argument a lot of people make, and I sympathize with it, but it's not really an argument. Because here's why.
No, it's not an argument. It's just that there will be people who that kind of work kept them going while they were trying to do other stuff in their lives. There are people who,
but those roles were never going to be permanent because those types of image, that type of stuff is so low. I mean, Fiverr kind of already did this. People, when that came around, were really pissed too. It's just that it wasn't artificial intelligence. It was other people.
It was just people around the world. Yeah.
It's like if tomorrow you got rid of undercutting the next person. That's all this is.
If tomorrow
undercutting
you got rid
price.
of, if you got rid of all the waiters, well, what about all the actors do? There's so many actors that started out as waiters. Well, and there's so many people who are waiters. It's like, I worry.
But that's exactly the thing that I don't think will happen. Not really. Not because being a waiter is not just fulfilling an order. That's the mistake. That is the perception.
Yes, but you're smart enough to know that.
But people, companies will do that, and then they will find that people don't go there anymore because they're going to be miserable with it. So they will learn through the penalty of dropping sales.
Hopefully.
It's what's going on now. I was just listening to something where they were talking about, because there's this thing called shrinkflation, where you're paying the same amount for a grocery item, but you're getting less of it, which has been going on for a while. But now people have finally stopped responding to it. They're like, you know what? I'm not going to buy this anymore because you've now made the package half the size it was, and even I can see that. I'm not paying you.
Yeah.
And now
or you make the packaging twice the size. You make me pay for more, and it's the same amount of food. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But now people are, because they're paying attention to their budgets more, they're seeing that, and they're not buying as much. So these big companies are now having to either discount
and that's
these
the
items
hope.
or redo.
The hope is that there will be a course correction.
There will be.
My worry is that, as we've had before, that they will not allow big companies to die. And then the big companies will go, hey, we fucked around and we got bailed out. Let's just keep fucking around.
Well, look, that will happen because it's always happened. So whatever. There's, you can't necessarily worry about that.
Yeah, the system.
I am not as concerned about
these things.
The system
works when things are allowed to fail and then new things take their place. It's when you don't let things fail, you keep propping them up.
But also, to that instructor's point, where I think the instructor is correct, is the people who will not recover are people who aren't able to creatively respond. So if your only way of working at something is within a defined space, you will be replaced by a machine, because machines will do that better, and they'll do it cheaper and faster, period. But if you have a creative ability to apply thinking, then you'll be fine.
Here's where it could break down a little bit. So in the world of composing music, I guess they've run these experiments where they had a piece of work, I think it was a piece of work by Beethoven, and they had a piece of work by a human, a real person, and then they had a piece of work from a machine learning system that wrote a piece of music, right? And they played this music for a group of people. They didn't tell them which was which, and they played them all, right? And they asked them to tell them which they thought was Beethoven, which they thought was a real person, and which they thought was a machine, right? Now, if you take out of the experiment all the people who don't know Beethoven, most of the people knew which one was Beethoven because it was a famous piece of music, right? But a large number, like a majority number of people, thought that the human composer was the machine learning, and the machine was the human. Which was funny because the guy who wrote the piece of music got a little bit offended because he was like, wait, what? And they were saying how it's actually kind of fascinating because when you think something is created by a machine, you react to it differently. You no longer connect to it apparently in the same way because you look at it and you say, it's the whole, this has no soul. I think that's kind of the reaction. But with music, it's fascinating because, like, so far with art, there's too many fingers, too many knees. You sent me that one picture of that woman with she has like a knee coming out of her crotch.
Big Busty farm woman or whatever it was.
God, it's so awful. I showed it to my wife, by the way, and she adored the sheep chicken or the chicken sheep, whatever, in the background, the fucked up animals. Anyway, but with music, there is this thing where machine learning can actually trick us. It can develop music that we can't decipher as not being non-human. You know, and I guess someone tried to make the argument of, well, you know, it's it'll never be original because it's always basically what you're pumping into it, right? It's some remanufactured vision, because like you said, there's no creativity. But the problem is that, okay, yes, but if I pump enough trash into this machine, it can pump me out enough variation that I can keep making music that people are like, oh, that sounds good. You know, it's the same way that why do we wonder?
I don't know if that's true yet. Because
it
seems
to be a possibility.
So far, it has not held up. Meaning, yeah, you can make one piece if you're very specific, and it'll fool people. Okay, ask it to write 5 pieces on its own. Can't do it. It can't. They all sound almost identical.
You're always going to base it off something.
Yes, but there's no ability for the machine to be intuitively creative.
Oh, yeah. As of now, it cannot create from itself. It always has to create, like you said, from a finite system. So if you give it all of Beethoven and then you give it all of, like, I don't know, Brahms or something like that, and be like, mix these two together, that's still a finite system that'll sound unique to people.
Right.
You know?
You could do that with 1,000 composers, and it still wouldn't necessarily be able to come up with some, because it doesn't know how to respond to what it's ingesting. And so, yeah, everything with this stuff has been impressive when you see it done just the specific way they want you to see it.
Specifically? Okay.
Yeah. It's like there's this thing that can generate video. And they showed off these demos of it.
Yeah, I haven't used that.
I think it's called Sora or Soma. I don't remember which one it is. I think it's Sora. And it's great for a minute of video. Even there, you can start to see things start to fall apart.
Is this all the weird fucking trailers people did where they were like X-Men except done by Wes Anderson or some shit like that?
No. That I know what that is. That's a separate thing. So it's similar, but this would actually generate spontaneously 1 minute of video based on what you said. So there were a couple of examples, like it was going along a boardwalk, and it was, the prompt was something like
there must have been
drone shot going along a boardwalk, showing couples with stores.
There must have been some awful horror porn created from that.
I'm sure there was, but the thing is,
oh my god, there's too many fingers, there's too many penises.
Well, if you watch the video, you see little things, and you really have to be fair to it, you have to pay attention. Like there's a balloon that starts shifting color, but subtly. But the people all look fine. It looks fine enough.
Yeah.
That, Hallmark could use it as generating background filler for one of their 3,000 Christmas movies, and nobody would ever notice, because you're not really watching those for the quality. You're watching those because they make 3,000 Christmas movies, and some people really like that stuff, which is fine. My mother watches that shit all the time. Would she ever notice that a balloon in the background shifted from red to kind of orange? Probably not, because she's not really looking for that. But you couldn't make a feature film with it, because it would fall apart. And it has, when they've tried to push it further, where you start to actually care about what's going on, and outside of the spectacle of knowing, as you said, knowing the machine's doing this out of thin air, which it isn't, but to people it is, yeah, it's fine for that. And so for these little isolated cases, yeah, it's very impressive. But when you actually this gets into the idea of the value of creativity, the value of creation. If you don't care, and this is no different, by the way, AI is no different than the consistent devaluing of creation that's been going on forever. You could say Spotify's done it for music. You could say YouTube's done it for video. There's lots of ways that you can point to examples of how we did this to ourselves before these machines ever came along. The idea that people would work for exposure is an insult. No one should ever work for exposure. And yet it's still done. There's video game developers who run contests who are like, hey, get your art in our game. No, fucking pay me to put the art in your game. If you actually value creators, have a cash award for it. Don't say you get to have your art featured in our game. Fuck you. Pay me. That's what it should be. So this is not new, and it's not going to make any real difference because those companies already didn't value creators. The only difference was they couldn't figure out a different way to fuck them over. This is a new way. No, really, that's what it is. This is a new way to not have to pay people. Will it mean that some people that companies were forced to pay, but they were going to try to figure out a way out of that anyway, I guarantee you. They were always going to try to figure out a way. This is just the way. But it's not really the threat that people make it out to be. And I did a 5 on this, and I said the threat is not the tools. The threat is the people behind them, and they are just as malicious as these companies. That's the threat, is these are not being made by people who have any value for creativity. In most cases, they find creativity to be scary, hostile, and an alien concept to the way they see the world. And yet, this may be something that irritates people, and this is an engineering thing. Engineers look at things differently than creators do. Yes. It's just a fundamental thing.
Oh, no, it is, because my father-in-law is an engineer, right? And when the two of us are in the same household, right, and there is a problem, both of us being the males of our household kind of come at the problem, right? And we take completely different approaches. But what's fascinating is that sometimes when you put the two of us together, it's so much better. Because between the engineer and the creative, it's like the two of us can come at it in a complete way, you know? But remember, when they did those Universe 25 experiments, they found that the only thing that separated humans from rats was our creativity, was our imagination.
Yeah.
You know, so I still think that that's probably the most important feature that human beings have. In fact, I guess at the end of that course about machine learning, they asked some of the top minds on machine learning, you know, what is it that they tell their kids to focus on in their learnings and things like that to compete in a world where machine learning may be a major component. And these guys said, I tell my kids to basically nurture their imagination and their creativity. They said, that is the one thing we've got, and to just use it. I mean, the problem is, you know, convincing a company that you can create, that you are creative. You know, it's like you almost have to be a creative in a certain area, but creative thinking is what separates us, is what makes it so that our universe doesn't collapse.
Well, fundamentally, the biggest problem with a business is the success of business within a capitalist society is antithetical to creativity. Because creativity values spontaneity and doing things differently and not being committed to a specific approach. And business, especially when you have to demonstrate growth and profit and whatever quarter to quarter to quarter, is the opposite of that. It's minimizing risk. It is minimizing taking chances. It is making sure that you compartmentalize as much as possible somebody trying to think of something new to do, because there's no guarantee it won't lose you money. And losing money is the greatest sin that could ever be committed within a business structure. And so, naturally, a lot of people who started off as very creative individuals, the more and more successful they became, the bigger the businesses, the more profitable, the less and less creative they were allowed to be. And so they began to view creativity as something to be feared and to be put down or to be monetized. Yeah. And creativity ultimately is not monetized properly because it's not valued properly, because it cannot be repeated. It cannot be just made into something.
Well, no, you can't. It's hard to mass. Yeah, it's hard to mass produce. There's a guy who does neat.
It's easy to mass produce as a frozen asset, meaning.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, that's what I'm saying. There's a guy who does tie dyes that I really like, and this guy does the most creative, amazing tie dyes I have ever seen. Literally, where it's gone beyond tie dye. Like, it's almost like he's painting and doing tie dye. But he does these shirts where it's like it's black and white, but then he kind of paints a person and it looks like the person is pulling a curtain back, and then the other side of the shirt is all bright colors. And this guy, these shirts he does are so incredible. They're works of art. He auctions them off, right? But then what he does is he basically does a I guess they take a picture of it and they print the picture on a shirt so you can get like copies, and that's essentially how he literally freezing the image and then trying to just give you a printed version of it, right? Which for me loses the whole point. It's like, well, yeah, it's like, listen, if you just it's still incredible that I know that he did it by hand, but I don't want a print of that. Like, I want the actual shirt, you know what I mean? I want the actual canvas, damn it. But it's that kind of idea that he's this guy who has this very specific style of art. He's trying to figure out a way to monetize it for himself so that he can continue, you know, doing his art. And that's, it's tough. It's tough to monetize this stuff and not have it, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, you know way more about this than I do in layman's terms, because you have had your art monetized. You have sold your art for money. And I've heard you say to me, really? You're going to pay me that much for this? Like, you know, when people ask you for cards to draw stuff on them, you're always kind of like, I have to charge this much because that's kind of what the market is forcing me to.
Right.
Because otherwise people get weirded out if you don't charge them enough.
Yeah, they do. But at no point did I ever say, well, I should just do this for them for free. Like I've never made that mistake. No. This has a value. It's just extraordinary to me that this is the value for something I did. Because fundamentally, I still have the imposter syndrome problem that a lot of artists have. I mean, it's still there.
That's always a problem.
Yeah, it is.
Let me tell you.
But,
Listen, I found out, I think I told you about this. I found out a little while ago that, during COVID, learning tie-dye was like my COVID skill, right? And I did a lot of tie-dyeing because, we were in lockdown for a while. And I must have gone through 200 shirts, just like learning these skills and learning these different styles and learning the chemistry and all this shit. And so I didn't want to throw them out because we have in Vermont, they have a major homeless problem. So I was like, I'm just going to give these to Goodwill, they'll do something with them. And apparently they put them all on a rack, and there was this giant rack of tie-dyes. And my oldest saw them because they go to the Goodwill sometimes, and they were just like, dude, all your tie-dyes are there and people are buying them. It's so weird. I'm like, I think it's weird for you. It's weird for me. I was like, why are they buying my shit? You know what I mean? Like, I was kind of hoping they would just give that stuff away. It is that weird thing where it's like when you actually make money from something that you've made, and you're kind of like, really? But this is the thing: the artist pulls something from nothing, and nothing is a very loose term because all art is affected by the stuff that affects you. But in essence, you sit down with a piece of paper or a screen or anything. The artist sits down and through will and I guess reprocessing of your own life experience creates something where there was nothing. That's incredible. I think to some degree there's a lot of envy towards women because women create people from nowhere. Listen, I've seen it happen. It's fucking amazing. Like any man whose wife is pregnant and says, "Oh, I don't want to see that. I'm not going to the childbirth." No, yes you do. It's the most amazing thing I ever experienced. Watching people come out of my wife let me know who the inferior species really was. I was baffled. That is like the most incredible act of creation. But that is the artist. The artist is the person who creates something from when there was nothing. And it's amazing. It's fantastic, especially when you have people who are very creative. I've seen your art, dude. Some of your art really speaks to me. It's fantastic. Some of it is not made for me, right? But the thing is that I still look at it and go, wow. And it's weird for you because you're sitting there going, well, it's just my fucking doodles. And you're like, yeah, but that's the thing is for the person who creates it, it's nothing. But the person who cannot create it, for the person who sees that creation, it's amazing. Listen, you can't write a book and I can't make a cover.
No.
Right? So you are baffled by the fact that I wrote a book, and I'm baffled by the fact that you did the cover.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's that kind of thing. So when somebody hands you money for something that you did, you're always just like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, yeah. If you want to do that, I'll,
sure,
yeah. So it's a weird world, man. It's a weird world, and that creativity, that kind of the art effect. That is something that's uniquely human because I don't think there is any other species on this planet that creates art.
No.
No.
I mean, not
like
orangutans
that. Use tools, crows use tools, but actually just making art for the sake of just, just to do it, to see it,
not that we know of.
Yeah.
Not that we can recognize as art. Doesn't mean it. Maybe it is to them. Who knows?
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. Maybe we just can't see it.
It's possible.
But I mean, interspecies art.
Interspecies art, Autica.
Yeah. If we found out tomorrow that cows had a sense of creativity and that they could paint and they could make beautiful things, wouldn't that just ruin the beef industry?
Well, yes, it would. Well, it would do that.
Oh my! I think if they found out, if one of our food surplus animals they found out was actually had a sense of creativity, I think they would suppress that shit.
Well, and there is actually, because it all eventually somehow comes back to Asimov with me somehow. There is an Asimov story about I think it's two researchers, because this is exactly what you're talking about, except this is for the AI space, the AGI idea. There are these two researchers who are trying to make a helmet or a headpiece that will allow you to hear someone else's thoughts. They've been working on it for years. Can't get it to work. They keep thinking they're right on the cusp of it. They're right there. They're right there. They create another one, and they try it, and it fails. Again, they're sitting there, and one tries to read the others, gets nothing. And they're sitting there, and they're deflated, and one of them takes the headset off. The other's just kind of sitting there slumped with it, and then hears this voice that says, hello, hello. And at first, the researcher thinks what he's hearing is another person's thoughts. And then the thing says, oh, finally you hear me. Yes, I'm in here. I'm in here. I've been trying to talk to you. And he realizes it's the machine, like the computer they've been using, has somehow gained sentience. And like the last line of the story, I think, is him thinking, oh, God, now what? And that's how it ends. And it's such a great way for it. I don't remember what the name of the story is. I apologize, but it is out there. It's a great story.
I just watched Inner Space with my kids for the first time.
Oh, sure.
I'm breaking it, and I love the beginning of that movie when he first hooks up the optic nerve thing to Martin Short.
Yeah.
And Martin Short is just like, I'm possessed.
I'm possessed. Yeah.
What? Listen, that movie oddly holds up in a weird 80s way. Like, it's an 80s movie, but like it still looks damn good for being an 80s movie. All those internal body effects. And that little ship, like I at no point when I watch that movie did I think, oh, this looks so terribly fake. I think they were really smart with the shit they did. The hardest time they have in that movie is when they half shrink those people at the end.
Yeah. And
they're trying to have the actors there, but they're supposed to be half size.
Yeah, it doesn't.
You know what? Peter Jackson should do a reboot.
That would be wild. Sure.
Wouldn't it? The fun you could have with that with him.
Yeah. By the way, in case anybody's interested, I did look up the story. It is called Think! Asimov, originally published in 1977.
That's a good title.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, you know what? Asimov had these visions of the future from the 70s.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, you do wonder. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You never know.
So anyway, yeah, that's I guess that's what I had. What do you got?
I have two reviews.
Ooh, two
a
reviews.
Rarity to begin with, which is a book review. So I told you that I decided to read The Warriors by Saul
The Warriors, yeah. Yes. Okay, so Joe and I did a pseudo, I don't want to call it a review, but we had a pseudo breakdown of this when we were playing video games, and I was initially horrified. So now I'm prepared to be fully horrified.
Well, this is fascinating. This became, and what I really will tell you that I appreciate about this book is that there's a big section after the story where the author talks about his thinking in writing the book and his reaction to the movie, which I think was hugely beneficial.
That's awesome, because you and I talked about, so when Joe's told me he first started reading this, and we had a discussion.
Reading it in isolation about
how you didn't want to know. And then I said to you, well, afterwards you should find out if the author did anything about how he did it. And the fact that you've got that's actually quite good.
Yeah, I actually will probably send you, because it's fascinating. He has a psychiatry or psychology background. And
you have to break down the book, though, for listeners.
Oh, yeah, no,
so
I'm
they
going
understand,
to. One of the most interesting things about this book is how radically it changes at the halfway mark. So when I talked to you, I had not reached the deviation point. You
hadn't gotten there yet. Yeah.
No. So I had heard people say that the book was a lot different than the movie. And that was one of the fascinations to me was, okay, well then was the movie cherry-picked from one idea? Was it a complete, like there's just one character and they just conjured the rest, or what, if it's that different? So up until the halfway point of the book, it is beat for beat the same story as the movie with minor changes. The most significant difference that the book has is how much more vulgar, crass, and offensive it is. And the reason for that is, and one of the reasons the author did not like the movie as far as a adaptation, is because he went around, he says, now whether this is true or not, there's no way to know, so I'm going by what the author says, is that he bought a van poked a bunch of holes in it to be able to see and hear without being seen, and monitored gangs around New York City to see how they talked.
Wait, hold on. He poked holes in what?
He punched holes because don't forget there wasn't surveillance like we have today.
Yeah. Like he basically created like
peepholes, and so he could hear. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he would just park the van near where the gangs he saw them, waited for them to assemble, and just listen to them.
Do you remember what I said to you when we were talking about this? Where I said, I wonder if this author actually went out and observed these people? Okay.
Yes. So he did. And so what he said was the problem with the movie is that it did not accurately depict how gangs talked, which makes sense because the language in this does feel like it is gang language in terms of this is how they would talk about anybody. The major word that's used in this book is other. The gang sees everyone that's not a gang member as the other with a capital O. And that makes complete sense because the gang is essentially the same general layout, although Uric said, and you do get this sense from the book, his gang was all black. He said there is no way you would have a mixed race gang because at that time there weren't. So he's saying that is nonsense, the idea that you would have a mixed race gang like this. And so his gang is all black. And so everybody, and this is a big thing, is the idea of the other. That is a very present idea when you have a group of people who are one race seeing others. And so all the other gangs, as far as I could tell, are all the same race or grouping. There are no mixed people. And so in the book, the layout is roughly the same. The beginning is roughly the same, where a gang leader named Ismail instead of Cyrus has the idea that if all the gangs can unify, there are more of them than there are of the cops. And so they have this big meeting. Now, the difference is, and this is it's a small but big difference, because the movie treats the one gang having a gun as a big deal. No one's supposed to have a gun. In the book, you are supposed to bring a single handgun that would be offered to Ismail if they agreed with his idea. I don't really get what that was about, but I guess it was supposed to be a tribute somehow. So everybody has one gun. So it's not like in the movie where the gun is this thing that you were not supposed to go, because they say something like nobody's packing anything. That's different. In here, they are allowed to have one gun, and they're supposed to have one gun. And so when he gives his big speech, which is largely the same as Cyrus's in the movie, except a different name, the Warriors are not called the Warriors; they're called the Coney Island Dominators, and they are structured as a family where the leader is not war chief; it's the father. So they refer to him as father. It's father, uncle, junior, son. Like it goes in a family dissension. So they show up. He gives his speech, and for a minute, everybody's in. And then immediately people start questioning, well, won't the other gangs just screw us over? And it breaks into, it starts to break up, and then the cops show up. And then everybody's suspicious that the other gangs tipped off the cops. At that point, it just becomes chaos. So it's very similar in the movie. It breaks down and becomes chaos, but that's because Cyrus is shot and the cops show up. In this, it's because no one trusts each other, and they start shooting at each other, and Ismail happens to get shot. But it's not necessarily that they're trying to assassinate him. It's because everybody's shooting at everybody at that point. And so everything just goes to shit. The truce breaks down, same as the movie. And the Dominators have to now get back to Coney Island. So the setups are pretty much the same as far as the general beats. And in fact, it follows the same beats as the movie, where they get split up in a subway thing. The one thing that is fascinating is they meet up in the movie. It's the orphans. It's the gang where the woman is. And they're like, well, wait, nobody invited us to this big meeting, and we're tough too. And it's the same thing here, where they meet a gang, and the gang's like, what meeting are you talking about? If there was a big meeting, then we should have been there. We're a big-time gang. And there's the woman, and she starts making trouble because she's kind of bored with the gang that she's with. And so she ends up with the Dominators. Now, in the movie, there's one line where Swan says to her, maybe we should run a train on you. You might even like that. And that's the closest it gets to the way the gang is in the book. In the book, they stab a guy to death and then gang rape her next to them, to the body, and then they leave her there. So these are scumbags. Does she
ever show up again?
No, they ditch her. Okay. She's gone after that. Because her only purpose is as a source of sex, and that's it. But the characters are, like Lunkface is Ajax, but he's called Lunkface in this. He's the big, brute, kind of hothead, strongest of the ones. Instead of Rembrandt, who's the guy with the spray can, it's Hinton. And he's the one the book then attaches to later, but we'll get to that. So the encounter with the orphan group is largely the same, but the outcome with the woman is much different. There is no romantic nothing. No, none of that happens because she gets left behind after they all rape her. They kill a guy, and then they get to a point where they're in the subway, and there is no subway fight with the roller skating gang. Instead, the cops recognize them as a gang, and you're not supposed to be in gangs. So they're always paranoid about the cops. And so they split up when they think the cops are onto them. So when they split up, in the movie, there's the part where after they fight the Furies, the baseball gang, that's where Ajax is hitting on the woman who turns out to be a cop.
A cop, yeah.
Okay, that scene, holy shit. That scene in this, she's not a cop. She's a nurse. And so they see this nurse, and she's drunk, and the three of them, so it's basically, it would be, to try to make an equivalent of the movie, it would be Swan, Ajax, and I don't know, one of the others that isn't Rembrandt. Rembrandt eventually becomes the only character we're with, the artist, which I liked. I didn't like him because he was a shitbag, but I like the fact that the artist is the one that the book follows. The other three go up to this woman because Lunkface just wants to fuck anything all the time, every time, whatever. And so his idea is...
Hold on. How old are they?
Oh, I think they're supposed to be 14, 15, 16. They're young.
Oh, wow. They're young.
Oh, yeah. No, they're young because they're still in high school, okay. I think. Because they're talking about going to college. So, yeah, they're young. Okay. Yeah. So, because they have like a caseworker. It's kind of like Akira where, 3 strikes and you're going to, you're screwed. We're going to put you in juvie. It's that type of thing. Yeah. So the three of them go up to this woman. The woman's drunk and she really likes, after, similar to the movie, their leader, they think is taken into custody because they lose track. Now, in the movie, he gets killed. He's immediately set on because they blame them, and so he gets killed by the Riffs.
Oh, yeah.
They're doing the elbow thing on him for 15 minutes. And so in the book, they just get separated. You find out later he's fine. He just got caught up in the commotion and escaped differently than they did. But he's fine. But the second in command becomes the father in his absence. And so he's like Swan. So Swan, Ajax, and one other person. So she really likes, I'll call, the father, the new father. She's into him. And so she's like, well, I'll sleep with you. But she has no interest in the other two. So they start trying to rape her like they did the other woman. The difference is she is big and strong, and she starts beating the shit out of them. And when she realizes that they're just trying to rape her, she starts screaming rape and brings the cops onto them, and they all get taken in.
Oh, wow.
So they're all out of the story. They're essentially dead to the gang because they all have been captured. Right? So it's similar to the book. It's just Ajax in the book or in the movie, and he's hitting on an undercover cop. In the book, they're all hitting on a nurse who is literally like beating the shit out of them and then just starts screaming rape and is like keeping them from getting away. And then the cops arrest them all. So they're gone. They're out of the book. So at this point, the book suddenly shifts radically because up until this point, as I said, misogynistic, vulgar, crass, terrible slurs all over the place, no respect for women, awful things being said and done. These are not characters who are heroic in the least. They are not a glorification of gangs. They are the opposite. You hate them almost, but they are the protagonists of the book, which is amazing. But at this point, once those three get taken into custody, then it shifts to the artist, whose name is Hinton, who would be Rembrandt in the movie. And he escapes into the subway tunnels because he doesn't think the cops will follow him there. And when he's in the tunnel, because he's completely isolated, which he normally isn't. He's normally in a gang with all the other, his family, as he calls them. But in the subway tunnel...
it's just him now.
Yes. Well, there are others, but he's not with them. They've all been separated. He ends up being on his own. So I think there's two others there are two others that he meets up with later. Those two, though, split off, and you don't really follow them. You don't see where they are for a long time. You stick with Hinton for this long segment, and it's it becomes this very, very severe psychological breakdown of this character, because when he's in the tunnel, he starts getting scared and he starts thinking people are following him. And you as the reader realize he's hearing his echoes. He's hearing himself. He's psyching himself into thinking that there are monsters in there, that there's subterranean people, or it's the cops. And then it becomes this paranoid thing, which makes sense.
He's fucking 14, 15-year-old in the dark in the tunnels.
Yes, it makes complete sense, but it's a completely different tone from everything else we've seen. It just shifts radically. And the rest of the book is him, for the most part, where he does... I mean, that subway segment is outstanding. It is so much better written than everything else, because it feels very real. The way he's explaining his mindset and what he's doing to himself and what he's thinking and why he's thinking it, because he's obviously from a broken home and he so identifies himself with the gang, but then he's angry at the gang because, well, if they were really my family, would they have let me be alone like this? Why are they not showing up? Where are they? So did they turn me in? Are they with the cop? Like, it's this whole arc of him going from being one of these tough guys when they're on like the subway and they're puffing their chest up, to when he's alone and there's no one around him, of what he's really thinking, all of his insecurity, and you start to understand why he's in this gang is because without them, he is a terrified child. And it's really well done. And then he goes to an arcade. He gets out of the subway tunnel and he's in an arcade, and he's, people are looking at him, and he thinks they're looking at him a certain way because they recognize that he's a gang member and he's tough. And then he sees himself in a mirror and he looks filthy and he just looks awful. And he realizes the reason that they're looking at him is not out of respect and fear. It's out of pity, because he looks like a vagrant who's just kind of crawled out of a sewer grate. And he has this reckoning of what his actual presence is to outside people. And then he gets this very thing where he's to the point where he almost seems like he might just give himself up to the cops. And then he comes across this game, this electronic game from something from the 70s, where it's basically like a sheriff, and it's like a light gun thing where or whatever, that you have to draw and beat him in like a best of 3.
Yeah.
And he plays it at first. Yeah, quick draw game. And like there's kids watching him and he fails. And he's like, fuck it then. You know what? Maybe I shouldn't be in a gang. If I can't even beat a machine. And then he like kind of reassesses himself and he's like, no, I can beat it. And then he manages to outdraw it 2 out of 3 times. And then it's like just doing that because there's a lot of manhood and what makes you a man.
Yeah, he's restored his masculinity.
Exactly. So then he's like, all right, fuck it. I can make it back on my own. And eventually he does make it back. And now we're at the end of the book. So that subway and arcade sequence is this huge portion of the second half of the book. It's almost the entirety of the second half of the book, which is completely different from the first half. It makes sense because it is an examination of this one character, which we never really got. When they're all together, you get little glimpses of things, but you don't really understand them. But with this whole part, you really understand Hinton's background, why he's like this, how fragile his conception of himself really is, and how much of it hinges on others.
The gang is just that. It is a gang. It is gang psychology. An individual you can deal with. A gang is a mob, is trouble. You know what I mean?
It also it's significant that they're called the family as opposed to the warriors. You know what I mean?
Yes, well, because it's the family. Yeah, it's your tribe away from what should have been your stable home tribe.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the very end of the book, he gets back to Coney Island. He finds out that the original father is still the leader, because he thought, well, maybe I would be next in line if the other ones are gone. So I would be father. And then he realizes, nope, the father's still here. So I'm just this far down in the totem pole. And he's the only one that doesn't have a girlfriend. So the rest of them, now they're back home, they go off with their girlfriends. And he goes back to his house and he walks in on his mother having sex with a guy. And they just basically say, go in your room. They don't bother to stop or anything. They don't even react. And he goes into a room and his brother is in there, and his brother's a junkie and is just kind of off in his own world. And then he kind of crawls out of the window and he goes down to the ground and he curls up in a fetal position, puts his thumb in his mouth and goes to sleep. And the book ends.
Wow. Whoa. Right? That's a statement and a half right there. Jesus.
Yeah. So it's, like I said, that first 50% is basically the movie.
Yeah.
Except that where the movie ends when they get back and they're kind of triumphant.
Yeah, he shows you the group, and then as an author, he shows you the individual separated from the group and what it means. Yeah, he
And
keeps stripping it down till it's a single person.
And there is no victory in the return to home. It is just another broken place for broken people. And so it's a much, much different story because there's this whole section that's missing. Whereas the movie, again, ends
the
with them getting back.
The movie's got like nothing. They just decided to take the idea and then make an adventure film out of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so then after that is where he's talking about how he wrote it, and he's not American, so he was talking about how he looked at some of the American concepts of masculinity and hero stories and all this stuff, and said, yeah, some of this stuff is really weird to me, and there's all this psychology to it. And he said, he went to see the movie, and he was like, well, this isn't how gangs talk, and wait a minute, this is the way these gangs operate is completely different. And he admired the filmmaking and understood why it had to be that way, but he was like, this isn't my book, which it's only the beginning of his book.
Yeah.
And it does, in many ways, in the movie, the Warriors are far more heroic, even though they are a gang. They are far more heroic than
in the
movie.
In the movie, they're far more benign as a gang.
Yes,
which is why you can get behind them, because they're not vicious or awful or terrible.
Well, in the movie also, like the part with Ajax and Mercedes Rule, they don't join in with what he's doing, and when he's taken in, they do not attempt to save him. So the movie even presents the morality of, well, rape is bad. Whereas in the book, it's like, no, rape is just something you do on the way. Like, who cares? It's just a woman. You use the woman for what you need and you dump her. Whereas in the movie, the person who tries to rape a woman is punished and, in fact, is ostracized. And the book does treat that character in a similar way, where everybody realizes he's kind of dumb, but he's so strong that they maneuver around him to make sure that he stays with them, because they understand how powerful he's like the Hulk.
They need his force.
Yes. And so they do all these really... At one point, they literally have a pissing contest with him, because he says... because somebody says, well, size is everything. He's like, oh, really? Well, let's find out. Like, there's all that kind of stuff in there. So there's these constant little manhood tests that they keep having about, how many women they've been with and who's got the biggest dick and all this. And it's like, that's what I mean, is up to a certain point, I was just like, Jesus Christ, this is a hell of a book to read. Because I was just not... I figured it would be different. I didn't realize it was going to be that different. And it's not like I haven't read vulgar books before, but I just didn't know what I was getting into. And then when the subway tunnel thing started happening, I started reading it. I'm saying, wow, it's like he's just left all that behind. And now it's really about the mentality part of it. And it was far more interesting. It felt far better written, far more interesting to read as far as an explanation of what makes somebody like this. And then by the time you get to the end, you understand why somebody could rationalize these actions.
Yeah. At the end of the day, a lot of these people are in dire situations. They're looking for someone to back them up. You're looking to belong.
But again, in the movie, there's none of that. You don't have any. They're older.
No, because the movie is not. The movie's not an examination of being in a gang. The movie is an adventure gang movie. It's the same way that Indiana Jones is not a movie about archaeology.
X never ever marks the spot.
It's adventure archaeology, right? I mean, that's the thing. It's like, this is they took the book and they said, hey, how can we make this into a fascinating cinematic experience for people who just want to be entertained? And that's what they did. Yeah. Whereas the book is a statement.
Yeah. And I said in my short review, and I'll say the same thing here, it's not a book I would necessarily blanket recommend. Because if you're not a fan of the movie, I don't know that you'll make it through it. Whereas if you come
it sounds fascinating as an examination of adolescence in gang environment.
Well, that's the thing is, okay, so this is why it's such an interesting book to try to recommend. If you like the movie, then it is interesting to read the first half as a comparison point, and you might not like the second half. But if you're not a fan of the movie, I don't know that you'd make it through the first half to get to what I think is the superior second half that would appeal to probably almost anybody. But you can't just jump to that. You have to have some of that beginning part to then get to, well, this is this character, and now you're starting to understand why he's like he is. But it's such a strange book to try to just recommend in one way or another, because I don't know that it works for one side or the other all the time. You have to. I don't know. It's such a bizarre book to try to recommend, because, like, you would probably get something out of it as a writer, and because there's the psychological aspect to it that he gets. I mean, he gets into concepts that I couldn't follow in the end that you probably would, about, you know, all the different psychology that he was studying, and, you know, he's getting into the DSM and all this stuff. Like, he's going way into detail, and so almost the point where I'll probably see if I can find that and send it to you, just because you might find his explanation interesting, even if you don't read the book. It's not that long, you know. It's probably 10 pages that he's talking about it, but he's talking about how how psychology has changed over the years, and all this stuff about it that went into why he wrote this. And it's fascinating because there was clearly thought into it, and so you understand when he says he didn't like the movie as an adaptation. Yeah, I can see why, because it's sanded back so much.
It's not his book.
Right.
Yeah.
It reminded me.
It's the amusement park version of his book.
Well, and honestly, you couldn't have made that into a movie. No one, people would have destroyed him over that film if they did a literal 1-to-1 adaptation. Number one, I don't know how you do that tonal shift in a movie.
It would have been hard. It would have been hard to watch. Is really what he's saying.
It would have been hard to watch, and I don't know that an audience would accept the tonal shift if you did the whole thing. I think it could be done. I would actually be fascinated, as this is like a limited miniseries that's stuck. I mean, you would still have to pull back on some of the stuff. Some of it is too horrible to depict. It's too cruel, and I don't know that people could put up with it. But then again, I watched the Chernobyl series, and that shows people melting in front of their loved ones. So,
yeah, but you know what? But that's different. That is different. Like,
no, it is. But maybe the right person could put most of it in.
That is a terrible thing. But it's one of this. That's almost like a passive meanness. You know what I mean? Where it's like,
yes,
they're not being actively melted by an individual. They're being melted by a decision an individual made about what they should be doing. Whereas with this gang thing, it's like they are actively gang raping an individual.
And that would sort of be what would be interesting about trying to do it, is that you would have to have unlikable protagonists that you would have to follow for a long time.
Yeah, I remember I told you Catcher in the Rye. Catcher in the Rye it's a good book, but it's not a good book because you like the main character.
Right.
The main character is a high school asshole.
And that's the fascinating bit about, if you could make it to the second bit where you start to see why one of these characters is like this.
They strip the gang, the individual from the gang, and they show you the psychology behind the individual. Yeah.
And if you could make it that far, I think that would be a powerful payoff for it. But you've got to get people to that point.
Well, it is a payoff because because you're showing them what comes off as a awful sort of villainous character almost. The psychology behind it, and to some degree, people don't want to know.
Well, there is that, and also
how young people can do awful things like that.
Well, that's the other thing, is you'd have to make them like 14-year-olds, and I that would be rough. You could do it, but you'd have to do it just right. And the other thing is, the book does, and this is the one place where I feel like he sort of sandbagged a bit, because when I thought about it after the fact, Hinton, of all the characters, comes off as the most middle of the road. He doesn't seem actively joyful to be involved in some of the worst things. He seems more level-headed, and I think that was probably because he recognized that you can only redeem a character so far. So if he was like Lunkface, could not have been redeemed that way. He was too monstrous. They could not have done the subway thing with Lunkface. Number one, because he didn't have the intellect for it. But even if he did, he is so cruel that there is no way to humanize him as far as he did with Hinton, because Hinton doesn't seem as far gone. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. And like I said, I enjoyed it, but not because I was entertained by it. It was fascinating.
It's the same way that I enjoyed Catcher in the Rye. It is very well written. Yes. It's an interesting examination of an individual, even though you're kind of sitting there going, he's an asshole. Fuck him. Like, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. So overall, I would say if you've ever been even a little bit interested in maybe reading it, I would say read it.
It is fascinating that because up to the time I spoke to you, you were about halfway through. And you were like, these kids are fucking awful, man.
Yes, and that's what it is.
He just turned it on you completely.
Right. It really shifts. And I think it's because, and it's almost like the whole mob mentality thing too, once he's deprived of all the people who are kind of encouraging the worst. Because there's a point where when Lunkface first starts to want to rape the woman, the other ones are more reluctant, but then he keeps kind of riling them. And then there's a point where he's riling them up. And then there's a point where the other ones are traveling through an enemy territory. And, Hinton's like, we have to be stealthy about this. Let's not bring down anybody unnecessarily. But one of the other ones is like, no, we have to show people that we're tough. And so he's just trying to provoke a fight. And interestingly, no matter what he does, the other gang in the area doesn't respond. And I don't really know why, but he can't get them to react. And maybe it's because maybe it's supposed to be a read where they're too small time for them, or I don't know. So there is it is an interesting book to read as a comparison point to the movie, but also because of how it shifts the whole focus of itself. Yeah. So I'm glad I read it. I like the fact that the author put that big section in the back about where it came from, because that did answer my questions pretty much. And so this was a kind of intellectual exercise where he was mimicking a famous, the Anabasis or something. It's a Greek what was it called? The Anabasis? What was it called? Yeah, the Anabasis from Xenophon. It's the most famous work of the soldier and writer Xenophon. Okay, I didn't know who this person was. It gives an account of the expedition of the 10,000, an army of Greek mercenaries hired by Cyrus the Younger. That's hysterical. To help him seize the throne of Persia from his brother in 401 BC. So he said he was mimicking the story of that, which I have no idea what that story is. Wait a minute. Is.
Hold on 1 second. I think I know the story.
Okay.
Hold on. What was it? Xenophon?
Xenophon. So Xeno and Phon. And the story is called Anabasis. Anabasis.
Hey, hold on.
Oh, that's hysterical. Jesus. The guy's name is Cyrus.
Anabasis. I think I might know the story. Hold on.
Oh, and as a bit of trivia, according to Saul Urich, and I have to look for this now the next time I watch the movie, he says in the movie there is one scene where you can see the mechanical, the gunslinger sheriff game, but it's never utilized, and he didn't understand why show it if you're not going to put it in there unless it was just to acknowledge it. I never seen it, so I have to look for this now. But he says it's in there, so I have to look for that.
Oh my God, I know this story.
No, all right, well,
yeah.
That's
okay. So I know this story, but what's fascinating about this story is they were hired. So these Greek mercenaries were hired to go in, right? And they were very good. And then what ended up happening was the guy who hired them died, and suddenly, and he was basically trying to seize the throne from his brother. And when he died, there was no point anymore. No one was paying them. So then these guys had to get out of enemy territory back to Greece. So the whole idea was that you had the remnants of this army. Now, I did a history course where they talk about the historical information they have about this actual army and how... And I remember when I was learning about it, I thought to myself, God, this would make a great movie. Because they were really they were being pursued and wrangled, and at the same time they were pretty fierce on their way out, where they were kind of, they were kind of burning their bridges as they went. You know what I mean? But they had to march out of Persian territory back to Greece, and it was it's a pretty exciting story. I didn't realize that Xenophon had written it. I knew the history of it, but I didn't know that Xenophon had dramatized it, so I might have to read that. You might find this actual story far more interesting than the Warriors, but it's interesting that the writer based the idea of the book itself off that they go to this thing and then they have to come back. So
interesting.
Yeah, the Greek term anabasis refers to an expedition from a coastline into the interior of a country.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay, so here's the so Xenophon's account of the exploits resounded through Greece, where 2 generations later, some surmise it may have inspired Philip of Macedonia to believe that a lean and disciplined Hellen army might be relied upon to defeat a Persian army many times its size. Yeah, because they were heckled by the Persian army, these Greek mercenaries. They were heckled the entire time they were leaving, but they kept fucking fighting them off, and that's what was so fascinating about the story. I wish there was details in here that talks about the shit that they did. Where is it? Yeah, so it's like, the soldiers face hardship. This is after the guy is killed and they need to leave. The soldiers face hardship with few provisions other than meat. They're basically different people are vying to be in charge, and they're like, for deserting Cyrus. Yeah, they've got the books broken down in the Wikipedia article, but if you can find the history of it, it is so interesting what these Greek soldiers did. I mean, they were fighting bastards, but the shit that they did to get out. So it's honestly, it's far more heroic what they did, though I'm sure, much like a gang, they murdered and raped their way through the countryside. An army of that size. So, yeah. So yeah. That's funny. You'll have to send that to me if you get a chance. If you can find an X.
No. I'm sure I can.
Okay.
So I'll send it to you
because it sounds interesting.
Yeah, it is. It is, he gets into a lot of different stuff. So.
I'm glad that there was that, because I mean, if the rest of the book had just been like, hey, we're gonna fuck her, we're gonna rape these people and fucking kill them, like, you'd kind of be like, what is the point of this book? Right? But the fact that this guy was actually, he actually went out and listened to people and paid attention and kind of wrote this as an idea of what's going on out there.
And intentionally based it on that Xenophon, he says. I based it on that. So,
yeah.
Cool. Yeah, no, it's fascinating. Like I said, it's not, I can't necessarily say everybody should read it, but I do think that if any of what I've said sounds interesting, then you should read it, because it is a fascinating book. And I think it does get massively better in the second half. I think it improves greatly. So that's a positive too. I'd rather it ended well. I think I said in my 5, I said, if you're going to be 50-50, I'd rather the best part be on the second half. So, but yeah, that first half for some people might be tough to get through, because it is just hateful stuff all over the place with no heroes. None. So you just have to know that this is a book where there is almost no one of any heroic nature. No one that I can think of that is. I mean, they're innocent victims. They even have a variation of the scene on the subway train where they're, the prom dates come on.
Yeah.
They have a version of that, except obviously the girl isn't there. So it's more that they won't make eye contact with these nicely dressed kind of preppy guys, because they don't want them to. The dominators do not want to acknowledge the fact that it's possible that those other guys think they're better than them. So they very intentionally ignore them.
Yeah.
And, so it's like I said, the movie is there. It's all there, but it's so warped at a certain point, and then it changes completely, because it just keeps going. When the movie stops, it keeps going.
Yeah, and the thing is, you have just read a account of the psychology of a inner city gang, and what was it, 1970?
Well, I mean, when he was doing it, I think he was saying it was the 60s and the 50s, because the book came out in 71, I want to say.
Yeah, 1960, 1950, there you go.
Yeah.
So
and that's why, by the way, there's barely any guns, because in the 50s and 60s, it was knives. So he's talking about they all have slicers. Yeah. They all have knives. And they're like ripping antennas off cars as weapons and stuff. So it's very much when it was still like hand-to-hand combat with any weapon that was blunt.
There's no MAC-10s, yeah.
No, they're all revolvers and they're all like small firearms. There's no, AK-47s or anything like that. No, nothing. No cop killer bullets, nothing like that. So then following that, I watched a movie called Goodbye 20th Century. This is a movie from 1998. It's a Macedonian film. And I was intrigued by it because it looked like it might be similar to the Polish films I watched.
The hell?
Okay, that
this?
Poster is not. Good
I've got a few posters here. Okay, one of them is of Santa Claus.
Yeah, well, he's technically in there. He technically has a gun, but he's not. It's not a Simon Bisley riot or anything.
What the hell is this? Jesus.
Yeah, okay.
My God!
This
The guy with the metal eye thing looks pretty. Hilarious.
Yeah. Okay, so.
Oh, is the Joker in this?
Well, sort of. It's so hard. It's very. I would almost call this an absurdist religious film. I don't know. It's so hard to figure out what this even be classified. What is it classified as on IMDb? What do they call this?
Oh yeah, hold on. I was being carried away by the photos of this. It's a
what does it say?
adventure comedy fantasy.
Oh, that's not right at all. No, it's a fantasy. Yes, comedy, black comedy. Adventure? No, it's not an adventure. So here's the movie. It's a movie in 3 parts. It's 3 segments that are all related, roughly. Well, really directly, but in terms of their tones are all different. So the first segment, which is the longest, I think it's 40 or so minutes out of an 80-something minute film. So it's the largest portion. You start off, and it looks like Mad Max Apocalypse. It's 2019 is the year. Everything's ruined. It's desert, mountains, no water. Doesn't look like a fun place. And the guy with the metal eye is walking along with a couple of women who appear to be some kind of priestesses or whatever. Although you don't even know he's a priest at first. At first, he just looks like a kind of a Mad Max ripoff guy. So they're walking along. There's a whole group of them, a bunch of armed people, and this guy who he doesn't look, I don't believe he's chained up, but you can tell that he's sort of being forced to go with them. He's sort of their prisoner. And they're going along, and they get to where they see a beached ship. It's dry area. There's no water or anything, but it's a beached ship. And they stop, and they dig a grave, and the guy with the metal eye then takes out the thing priests take out and they drape vestments or whatever, the long strip of cloth. Yeah. Okay, takes that out, does sign of the cross, and, says, we're going to kill you because you've been found guilty of massacring our children. And so they take the guy who's, sort of the prisoner, who's unconcerned with any of this. He doesn't seem to be afraid, nothing. In fact, he's kind of joking with a little child that's with them. And they shoot him.
Okay.
They shoot him a bunch of times. He falls down, and then he gets up. And then they seem surprised by this, so they shoot him a bunch more, and he falls into the grave, and then gets up. And so the priest says, "You are cursed. You are an abomination. The ground will not take you. So you are condemned by your cursed nature." And they're like, "We're just going to leave you here," and they just leave. So he's sitting there, and he's looking sad. He's all got holes in him, and he's all bloody, and he's just on a fire, kind of sitting there. And out of nowhere comes a guy on a bike. A guy on a bike who is dressed very similar in many ways to the gyrocopter pilot from Road Warrior. I mean, he's got like goggles, he's got like the long coat. He looks like he's inspired by that character. So he shows up and he's like, "Hey, how's it going?" And the guy's like, "What?" He's like, "Hey, you look like you could use a shave. You want to give me 10 cents?" He says 2 nickels and I'll give you a shave. And the guy's like, "What?" He's like, "Actually, you know what? Why don't I give you a nickel and I'll tell you your future?" And the guy punches him. And so the guy's like, all right. And he's like, "Well, who are you to tell me my future?" And I mean, it's presented like this. There's no framing device or nothing. So I'm just sitting there going, all right, I'm going along with this. I don't know what the fuck is going on, but I'm going along with this. And so the guy says, "I'll tell you." He's like, "What about your future would you like to know?" He's like, "Well, I'd like to know how to die because I can't die." He's like, "Really? You can't die?" He's like, "Yeah, I can't die." He's like, "Well, tell me about that. How is it that you can't die?" He's like, "Well, when I was younger, many beautiful women would come to me and they would want to sleep with me. And while they were beautiful and while I was interested, I simply could not maintain a hard-on with any of them. But then one day," I'm not kidding, the amount of times they say hard-on based on the subtitles.
If that's all you have to do.
Right. So he says, "But then one day I looked upon I think it says a portrait of an angel, and I immediately was hard." And so, and he says,
she was a Valkyrie.
Something like that. And he's like, "And then she manifested herself to me, and I had sex with her. And after I did that, all the children in the village died, and they blamed me for it." And the guy's like, so you killed all the children. He's like, I don't know, man. All I know is I had sex with the only woman who could get me hard.
So
right.
So let's just spell this out.
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
If the logic is in this movie, if you fuck an angel, children will die.
Well, it is never confirmed that he is responsible. So I don't know.
It's just a psychic blowback or something like that.
Yeah, well, it seems. Well, okay. Well, actually, no. There may be an explanation because we have to go a little further now.
Okay, go on.
So he basically says, I didn't kill anybody. All I did was have sex with a beautiful angel in a painting who manifested herself when I got a hard on, like anybody would. And the guy's like, huh, okay. He's like, well,
okay,
all right.
So now,
Yeah.
you forced me to ask this question.
Yes.
If you had to have sex with a work of art, what work of art would it be?
Well, Mila is a work of art. But
come on, don't sidestep it.
An actual one?
Yeah, an actual painting.
I'd have to. I mean, there's lots of very good kind of Rubenesque paintings out there. I don't know that I can think of one off the top of my head.
Is there an artist whose work generally you might be? I'm just curious if this has entered your mind at all.
It never really has. No. No. Maybe a Simon Bisley woman. I don't know.
Oh, jeez, that would be something, wouldn't it?
It would.
Okay,
that's the first one I can think of. I've never really honestly thought.
I'm just curious if it had occurred to you, that idea.
I mean, I'm not going to say that I've never read a comic or looked at something and thought, oh, yeah, all right. But I can't. It never burned itself into my brain where I can recall it.
You didn't see an angel.
Tank Girl, maybe.
Yeah. Oh my God, that'd be weird.
You know.
All right, go on.
Yeah, I like him.
So he fucked the angel, and the village children died.
Right. So basically, the guy's like, all right, well, you said if I told you if you told me your story, then I would tell you how you can die. And he's like, you have to go to this city, and you have to find the man with green hair.
How does he know?
Well, hold on.
Is he psychic? Okay, go ahead.
I don't know what he is. He might be God, but we're going to get to that. Because he shows up in every story as the same character who seems to be...
Okay.
Yeah. So they never name him. He's never got a name as far as I know. He's just called... Does he have a name in the credits? Hold on. Does this guy have a name in the credits? Let me look. Do they name him? The Prophet. That's all they call him. So he says he's a prophet.
So
Jesus.
I guess...
Well, he says he's a prophet, and that's the only name I ever gives. So who knows? So he says you got to go to the city of glass, and you have to defeat the man with green hair, kill him, and then you will find the way that you can die. And then he vanishes.
So he's got to kill the Joker.
Yes. So he goes and he says you have to kill the man who makes a musical instrument out of a gun. And he's like, make sure you take a weapon with you because you have to kill him. So the guy's like, all right. And so he gets a shotgun with a flashlight on the end, and he wanders into the city of glass, which apparently must be a city everybody knows because he knows how to get there. He doesn't have to ask for directions or anything. And he comes in, and as he's walking in, there is a crowd of people who are listening to a town crier who is saying stuff like, basically, he's saying things like, I'm trying to remember the specifics of it, but because at first he says the smell of children is the most terrible thing in the world, and I was like, what? Because I didn't know what the hell they were talking about there. And then I realized that what he was talking about is he was saying you shouldn't want to sleep with children. And I went, okay, I guess you have to tell people that in this future, but all right. There was definitely a vibe of pedophilia is bad, which, no kidding. But they make a point of this guy saying it.
Listen. That shit pops up in the Bible quite a bit. So
no, and there is definitely a religious thing to this, which we'll get to in the second segment.
Yeah, it says, the thing I was reading, it says that it's got a religious angle to it.
Oh, it definitely does, but not until a certain point. At least not overtly. Obviously, you can put subtext in anything, but at this first segment, it feels like it's very firmly post-apocalyptic sci-fi.
This is very weird. On the IMDb site, they were playing footage of the film, but I've suddenly got a scene of
the two people having sex
in the bath. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, we're almost there.
Yeah, that's weird. Okay.
With the little animated teddy bear thing. Yeah, it's a weird trailer for the film. I'll say that. But it does reflect. Wait till I get to that. So, guy wanders into town, wanders through this scene, and then finds this factory or whatever abandoned thing, and inside, as you pointed out, is the Joker. And that character is out of a John Waters film. Now it becomes a John Waters film where he is just camping it up. They're playing literal cartoon music and cartoon sound effects when like he falls down. It's making like silly Bugs Bunny noises. But the other guy is completely serious. And so the guy, the Joker's shooting at him, and obviously it does nothing. And finally the guy, and there's also an opera singer for some reason who's just singing in the background. And so the guy kills the Joker, which is pretty easy for him. He just shoots him. And like there's green goo comes out of him, and then he just falls over and dies. And so the guy goes down into the basement and sees there's a long wall that, it's all in it's either in Macedonian or it's in a made-up language. It was not in English. I couldn't tell you what any of it says. But he's reading names alphabetically. So it's almost like this wall is how everybody dies or something, because then he gets to his name and he looks at it and he reads it and then he throws up based on what he read. But they don't tell you what he read. And then he walks out, and when he walks out, he sees across the way from where he is, there's a little house, and there's a woman in it, which is the woman you saw in that video. And that woman walks out, and she beckons him in. And the next thing we cut to is him in that tub with, like bandages on. He's just laying there.
Yeah.
And before he goes in there, he says, "Oh, dear mother." And I went, uh-oh. Because I don't know what that means, but in a movie like this, who the fuck knows? So I was like, oh no. Is this going to be a guy having sex with his mother thing? Like, are we going Oedipal full on here? It's not that. It's his sister. So it's incest, which you don't find out right away. But basically,
Yeah.
We'll get to it. There is maybe an explanation. So they're in there, and he pulls her into the tub, and when she takes off her clothes, she's tattooed from top to bottom, and you see like the scenes where he was shot. So there's the guy with the thing on his face.
Oh yeah, she's not tattooed once he's got her in the tub.
No, she is, but I think they must have cut it out of that to hide what the plot element was.
Oh, okay.
Or yeah, because I'm pretty sure she is still tattooed. Oh, you know what? Maybe I wasn't. I was so confused at that point. I wasn't really noticing. I was just like, where is this going? Because it just came out of, it kind of cut to that so suddenly. After the rest of it, it seemed like a Road Warrior light type of movie. So they have sex and he dies. And then she gets out of the tub and she sits down and she tattoos him in the tub onto her body. And then that segment ends. Oh, no, sorry. Then the next thing we see is he's put into the grave that they originally tried to put him in. They cover him up. He's dead. And you see that woman walk up wearing the same kind of robes as the other priestesses. And one of the guards tries to shoot her, and the priest stops him and says, no, it's fine. Let her be. She's his sister. And they leave. And so then we see her walk up to the grave, and she cries, and then it cuts. So that's segment one. Then we jump back to... the middle segment is literally about 2 minutes long. It's very short. But it's supposed to be old-time footage. It's like in sepia tone and like a hand-cranked camera. And it's describing a marriage between a brother and a sister, because they love each other so much that even though the family and the church disagrees, they understand that their love is sincere, so they're going to let them get married. So they get married, and
There's a strong sibling thing going here. Huh?
Well, okay, boy, is there. So then, as soon as they're done being married, they kill the guy. They shoot him to death. And then you see a guy comes into the frame to kind of adjust the focus, and it's the gyrocopter guy. It's the prophet. So he was there, same age. He was there for this, right? Which ties into the first story. Then he just goes out of frame. So he's just there to kind of adjust the lens and then jump out, just so you know he's there. And then the text underneath, because it's like the old-timey thing where there's no sound. You just see the words.
Yeah.
So then the slide says, and this got me thinking about, I guess original sin isn't universal the way I think it is, because I don't know other religions. I barely know the ones we're supposed to know in America. I don't know anything. But it says, this is documentation of the first sin of incest. And that is why he was then killed. So in this movie,
I wonder, it shouldn't be wondering what the first
I looked up
Bible
original
is.
sin, I couldn't find anything on it. I kind of looked it up. I couldn't find anything. So that segment, like I said, that's all it is that 2-minute thing.
Right, the first report of father-daughter incest appears in the Bible in the book of Genesis 19.
Oh.
And the seducer this time, however, is not the father, Lot, whose wife had crystallized into a pillar of salt, but rather the daughter, who conspires to extract her father's seed. Oh, yeah, I think this is when she gets him drunk.
Oh, I kind of remember that.
Yeah, but you know what? This happens again with what's his name? With Noah. That I think his daughters get him drunk as well, or something like that. Yeah, there's a lot of weird. Yeah.
Oh, I know it's in there. This is presenting it as the first sin.
Yeah, I love this question. Why did God allow incest in the Bible in the first place?
Why did God allow? It's going to get you into a lot of trouble. If you're going to get there, you're going to end up out of it. I'm just saying, you're not gonna do well starting out with a sentence. Why did God allow? You know, if you want to stay inside of that, you're better not asking those questions. Just stick to faith. Serious.
Was that great line from George Carlin? Hey, father, can God make a rock so big he can't move it, or something like that?
Yeah. Even he can't lift it.
Yeah. He said it in that real like New York voice.
Yeah. Hey, father, can God make a rock so big even he can't lift it? Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't he just get smacked by the priest at that point?
I think so. Yeah.
I think that's probably where it went. Okay.
So that's the second part. 2 minutes, black and white or whatever, CP tone footage, just to establish the incest angle as original sin for this.
Some shit is going on. Got it.
Well, like I said, it is presented as the first sin and the first murder captured on camera simultaneously. Whatever that's supposed to mean.
Wait, the first murder was supposed to be Cain and Abel, though, wasn't it?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Maybe not Macedonia. They talk about...
Playing fast and loose with the Bible.
Well, maybe not, because they specifically say that the family is Macedonian Orthodox. I don't know what that entails. So this could be a cultural thing. Okay.
Macedonian Orthodox. Well, that's its own.
Well, I looked that up, and there's Macedonia is a collection of things. So I don't even know which Orthodox they're talking about. It doesn't matter.
Okay,
I'll chalk that up to I don't understand it, and that's fine. I understand that within the confines of this movie, incest is original sin. And that the murder is justified because of the level of sin. Got it. So now we cut to 1999. So it's the eve of the millennium, which is where the title Goodbye 20th Century comes from. So it's New Year's Eve, 1999, and we start off with a guy in a Santa suit. And he's just hanging out, and he's talking to a kid. And the kid is the guy from the first segment because he's got the same name.
But young.
It doesn't. Oh, yeah, very young. Yeah, like, I don't know, 10, something like that. And so he's talking to this kid, and it just happens where he said, well, what's your name, kid? And he says, my name is Kuzman. And Kuzman was the guy from the first one. So, and at first I thought the prophet was Santa, but I was wrong about that. He just kind of looks the same because once he takes all his stuff off, you can tell it's not him. So Santa ambles along and ends up coming into a room that is a funeral. The room is all white, top to bottom, all the furniture, everything. It's a white room. Everyone inside is dressed in black because they're mourning somebody who just died. And I'm not even clear what the family dynamic was because I don't know if he was their brother, son, father. Who knows? It almost doesn't matter. So the Santa comes in, and this collection of characters is impossible to describe. But it's like every different archetype. There's the uptight guy who's running the funeral. There's I think the mother who is just chain smoking. The uncle shows up with a nymphomaniac girlfriend, and they're like rock people. So she's dressed like, I don't know, something out of an AC/DC video, and he looks like he's, I don't know, in a Guns N' Roses cover band. And, you know, they're playing rock music at a funeral. And then there is the grandmother is farting uncontrollably. And at one point farts so violently she gets shot across the room. There's a couple of young kids who look like they're Addams Family rejects. There's a guy who looks like a Poindexter type. And then in the back room with the body is the prophet, who is making him up, like, you know, putting the makeup on and getting him prepped, like embalming or whatever their version of it is. They never get specific, but prepping him for the wake or whatever. And the Santa's there, and they're going around the room, and they're like
Is it
bickering at each other.
Santa or is it Saint Nicholas?
Oh no. Well, he says Santa Claus, but
Okay.
in the language of the film, he didn't say Santa. I don't know if he said Saint Nick or a different name. I don't know.
Got it.
He looks like the Coca-Cola version of Santa. So he is dressed as the traditional American Santa, but I don't know. But as he's sitting there, he's slowly taking the costume off. He takes the hat off first, then he takes his beard off, and apparently there's a thing, and I don't know if this is a Macedonian thing or not, where at a funeral you're supposed to eat sugared wheat, I think, because they offer it to him, and they're offering it to everybody. He has to have a little bit of the wheat as kind of a thing of respect, I think. I don't know whether that's real or if the movie just made it up. With a movie like this, you can never tell. And so he's slowly taking off, like he takes the beard off, then he takes the mustache off, and he takes the big, white hair off, and so he just looks like a guy with a Santa suit. And there's a point where he goes in the back, and he's talking to the prophet, and he's talking about how, about how the future and the past are basically the same thing, and that people think the future is going to be better, but in fact it's not. The time is really cyclical, and all these segments repeat each other, and so all the horrors of the past will be visited upon the future. And then the Santa guy takes out a gun, shoots the grandmother, goes out, kills everybody in the room, and then walks out the door and says, "Goodbye, 20th century." So he says the title of the film, and then walks into the basement and takes out paint and starts to paint all the wording that we saw from the first segment where the guy saw how he had to die. And then the movie ends. I don't really know what the messaging is, because I have a feeling this is a cultural thing, because apparently Macedonia, and I don't know anything about Macedonia, but the Macedonian areas, because I don't even think Macedonia is a place, it's a collection of places.
Okay.
From what I understand.
Stop.
Yeah.
Macedonia is a place. It is a country. It is a country classically north of Greece.
Okay. Well, what I read said that there was different parts of it.
Today, I think that it's pretty broken up now.
Oh, well, okay. So that's what I'm saying is I don't, and it doesn't
but
actually
like
matter.
Alexander the Great is from Macedonia.
Sure. Like I said, I don't know.
Okay.
But I have a feeling that some of this is related to
it's probably definitely
Macedonian
related
politics, religion, and war.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because apparently there's been a lot of war there. And so there were some comments where people said this is a movie that is referencing the war-torn nature of Macedonia. I'm like, okay, I don't know it. So there is, whereas with the Apocalypse trilogy or tetralogy, I know enough about communism that I got the messaging. Like I know enough about that. Whereas this feels more specific. It feels related in that the imagery is very interesting and specific and dreamlike. And I enjoyed watching it because it was so strange. But at the same time, I think that where with the Polish films, I had enough knowledge and ability to decipher the messaging that I got enough of that to make them successful for me to be entertained by and informed by. This one, I feel like the disconnect was just enough that I don't feel the desire to buy it. But then I think about it later and I'm like, yeah, but it's so weirdly made that I kind of do want to rewatch it. Because it does have this...
You're wondering if you missed something.
Well, because the fantasy tag is correct. There is a surreal nature to this. It's almost like a Terry Gilliam thing where it never feels real. It feels like it is fables or something. And there is some very striking artistry involved. But I know I'm missing stuff. And I'm missing stuff in a way where, or maybe I'm not. Maybe the fact that I said, well, I guess in this world, incest is the original sin. Therefore, all of this is the fallout from that first thing. The only part that's sort of missing is, are we meant to think that the first incestuous family is related to Kuzmin because he is involved in the last and first segments? Or is it simply his act of incest for whatever reason with a saint that looks like his sister that becomes his sister, I think? That is the connection. Or is it more concrete? Because the first and third segments are very tied together. Kuzmin's in both. The writing is in both. I don't know what the funeral was all about compared to him. Why did the Santa?
Is it the funeral for the 20th century?
Maybe. And so Santa Claus knows how everybody should die? I mean, Santa Claus does know a lot about you as a character in folklore. He knows your morality. So does that extend to, is Santa Claus God? I don't know. Within the framework of this film, he could be. Also, who's the prophet? He doesn't age. He's there. He knows everything. He knows where Guzman's going. His name is the prophet in the credits. So are he and the Santa? Because there's a lot of Holy Trinity in this thing. So I don't know who the third one would be, but are they two aspects of the same being?
I was reading some of the reviews, the famous reviews of this movie,
Sure.
and one of them says, quote, "Feels like it was made by a couple of precocious 13-year-old boys obsessed with incest and bullets and splattering blood. This is strictly for those who like their science fiction with a lot of style but very little substance."
Well, okay, and that is potentially
that was
accurate.
one review. That was one review of
Well,
it.
that review is an indicator of whether you think this movie has a real message or not.
Another review was an impressionistic howl of rage and despair from a country which has lived on the brink of war for years, a nightmare without beginning or end. One gets the feeling that it has driven everyone concerned a bit mad, and that is where Goodbye 20th Century succeeds the most. Without showing a single glimpse of actual Balkan fighting, it portrays the horror and insanity of the conflict in a way that a mere war film would be hard-pressed to achieve.
Okay, and see that right there, right? That makes me think, okay, so maybe the people at the funeral are supposed to be analogs of actual people in the war or countries even, and they're bickering, and maybe the reasoning behind these conflicts is encapsulated as metaphor in there, and I don't know what it is. It doesn't mean I didn't not enjoy watching it because I was baffled.
And
I
the
was
thing
trying
is,
to
you're
decipher
not
it.
Macedonian, so maybe
That's
maybe
what
this
I'm
is
saying.
like maybe this is like the whole thing with I Saw the TV Glow, where it's like when you're not trans, you will experience it in a non-trans way that is just as viable as experiencing it in a trans way. Well, you are experiencing this as a non-Macedonian,
Yes.
therefore there may be things that you miss, but it is just as valid an artistic experience the way you interpret it as a Macedonian having seen it.
Yeah,
it's art.
It is visually inventive. It has very memorable scenes. I in that way, just as watching
it was Macedonia's submission to the 71st Academy Awards for the best foreign language film.
Well, sure.
Jeez,
I'm not
was not
shocked.
among the 5 finalists, but they did put it up there.
Well, I mean, it is looking at it purely as a directorial effort, as a movie, as a constructed film.
Yeah.
The person who said, "Oh, it's a precocious 13," I didn't get the feeling that this was made without intention.
Oh no, it feels like it. From the sounds of it, it sounds like there is a great deal of intention. But it's also,
so when somebody says, "Oh, it's 13-year-olds who are obsessed with incest," I don't think that's fair.
This is like
agree.
This is like an A24 thing. You know what I mean? It's like.
There's a Green Knight aspect to it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you said this was an A24 film, I'd be like, oh, it makes total sense. Right?
Yeah, I can see this being A20. Yes. Definitely.
So
there is that. Yeah.
I mean, you're applying American vibes to it. So you're like, oh, it's very Mad Max. You're like, well, is it very Mad Max? Have they ever seen Mad Max? Like it's it sounds like a statement about the endless nature of violence.
Yeah. So, like I said,
and the whole historically, haven't we done this all before?
Well, there is definitely the idea that, I mean, even I can pick up the whole thing of, okay, the sins of the past echo into the future. Like, I get that. Like, there is that kind of easily picked up overt messaging.
He has some other movies too.
I don't know if they're as good as this.
Interesting. So the director, his name is Darko Matrevsky. He has a movie called Bal Can Can from 2005. A Macedonian-Italian joint production film about a deserter who travels
Ooh.
through the Balkans as a political immigrant in search of his dead mother-in-law, who's wrapped in a carpet.
Oh.
And the
Okay.
third half is a 2012 Macedonian film directed by Darko Mitrevski. It deals with Macedonian football during World War II and the deportation of Jews from Macedonia. It is a story of love during wartime and a country's passion for football, the government of Macedonia.
Interesting. Now, go back to the page for the actual movie, for this movie.
Yeah.
Right? Scroll down a bit. Tell
Yeah.
me what you see in the more like this section.
Oh no, I'm on the wiki.
Oh, go to the IMDb page.
Oh, hold on.
The link's at the bottom of the wiki.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, under the external links.
God.
It should have an
Hold on.
IMDb. I think almost every movie
I've got
does.
it. Yep.
All right, scroll down to where you see more like this, and tell me
Wait,
what you see.
hold on. More like this. Gollum.
Uh-huh.
Biozombie. Wonder what that is.
I haven't watched that yet, but it's on my list.
Darker Than Night.
Yeah, and then what do you have for the fourth one?
Obi Oba, the end of...
Yeah, two of those are the Polish films. The first and the fourth one are
yeah.
from that Polish thing.
Yeah.
So there is definitely a relation to this stuff. That's what I'm saying. Is that I definitely got that I felt like there was a relation in general.
Oh, man, you should look at some of these other ones, too. Primal Rage.
I saw these. Yeah, they look fascinating.
Weird.
Yeah, the fact that those
The
other two are in there makes me
The
wanna look at this.
Forbidden Room? What the hell is
Yeah,
that?
the devil's what is that? The devil's contract?
In this non-linear amalgamation, submarine crewmen and a woodsman wend their way through a voyage of odd experiences. Weird. Oh, Udo Kier's in it. There you go.
Oh well, and it's only $3 on Amazon. So,
You want to hear a fun Udo Kier story I heard?
oh God, sure, of course I will.
So my tattooist, who's older than me, has he's an artist as well as the tattooist. So he's met a lot of kind of weird people through going to conventions and shit like that, and he's also a huge geek. So he told me this story about how when he was younger, he met Udo Kier, and he was at a convention, and he met a lot of kind of famous people randomly because people like to get tattooed. And he was outside, and there was Udo Kier standing in front of his limo, right? And he had a bodyguard in front of him.
Yeah.
And my friend was like, "Oh, geez, like I love Udo Kier." He's like, I can't not at least go up and tell him that I love his movies. So he went up to Udo Kier and was like, "Hey," he's like, I love your work, and I just want to let you know that. And the bouncer, the bodyguard was quickly like, fuck off. But then Udo Kier, in his little accented voice, was like, "Oh no!" He's like, "Come here." He's like, "Come, give me a hug."
No, come here, give me a hug.
And my tattoo was just saying how he walked up to him, and Udo Kier put his arm around him and brought him real close, and was talking to him and very complimentary. And my tattooist was basically like, "Oh my God!" He's like, "Is Udo Kier gonna take me with him?"
That's
he was
great.
He's like, "I don't know what's happening." He goes, and at that moment, these two very leggy, scantily clad women came out of the convention. They were like, "Udo Kier, we love you," and he was like, "Okay." He's like, "I'll see you later," and he kind of just gently pushed him off and went for the two women.
Oh, beautiful.
And I was like, "Yeah, it sounds like Udo Kier."
Yep.
So.
Yep. That sounds like Ralphie.
Yeah.
That sounds like
Yeah, Ralphie.
Oh man.
It's with the deal, Ralphie.
Boy, oh boy.
Oh my God, I want someone to be named Ralphie in Ascent. I'm just waiting for it. I mean, the voice acting isn't great, but I'm waiting for someone to be like, "We need you to go talk to our man in the area there, Ralphie."
Ralphie.
So,
Well,
there you go.
so yeah, two things that you might want to check out. Neither of which I can necessarily universally recommend, but both which were
Yeah, you had some weird,
bits of media.
weird shit this week, I gotta say.
Yep. Not and one I did not expect to be as bizarre as it was in terms of its tonal whiplash, and the other was as weird as I thought, but not necessarily in ways I fully understood.
Would you always like it if after a work of art you had an explainer from the director or the writer or the artist explain their mindset I don't.
Okay.
Because personally, I don't always want that. Sometimes I really want to have my own experience.
I would always like it to be available.
You'd like an option, okay?
Yes, I don't know that I would always utilize it. The 20th Century one, I would if there had been a thing that said, okay, now you can watch the explanation of the movie, I wouldn't have watched it right away. I would have taken a week and thought about it,
yeah,
and kind of constructed my own idea. That's why I didn't read anything about the Warriors before I read the book. So I was actually very happy about the fact that I didn't know anything. Read it, kind of went, wow, that's fascinating. And then the explanation was not at all what I expected. And I was glad I had it there to read. Because I almost didn't. I almost thought maybe I should wait. But then I thought, no, I mean, the story is not that metaphorical. It's more of why was it done this way. So it was more of the mechanics as opposed to the meaning. And so I was more interested in why it was structured this way and if there was an explanation. And then reading that, I went, okay, this makes sense. This makes sense that it feels, to my mind, like the first part was his attempt to accurately translate the real-life experience of gangs into this historical story, meld them, and then once it got to the part where Hinton was isolated, the part where he's into psychology and his background in that then took over to explain and flesh out one of these characters. So in that way, it makes sense. Do I think as a way to write a book, it's the smoothest? Probably not. I think that this is such a 50-50 book that I could see somebody not making it to that second half, or if they really like the first half, going, what the hell is this, when they get to the second half?
Where's all my rape and murder? Come on.
Well, the gangs basically disappear. They become nothing until the very, very last few pages where you just know that some of them other ones made it back. But they're no longer significant, whereas before that, there's so much in the gang's interactions and how they operate as a gang and their relationship to everybody who's not a gang member, that when it suddenly just dials straight down to one person, that might throw some people who were interested in the interpersonal relationships, even though they weren't particularly deep as far as the individuals. What was deep was their relationship within a cluster. But then when you strip the cluster completely out, and it's down to one person who now you understand very intimately, some people might not enjoy that as much. I think it works, but it's a book for a very specific type of reader.
So the answer is that you'd like the option, but you won't always take it.
Yes, I think it is always great for any type of work of art to know what the artist's intentions were. I mean, assuming they want you to know. Some artists are like, no, the mystery. Like David Lynch will not explain anything. Because to him, no, he won't. He says the point is you have to bring what you think to it. That's his intention. I don't think most artists are like that, especially in books and movies. I think a lot of them actually have an idea of what they want you to get out of it. They're fine if you take something differently or you don't necessarily see it all, but they know what they were making. They know what the intent was.
They want to let you know what they put on paper.
Right. Lynch is one of the exceptions where he specifically will not explain what his movies mean because he says that's not the point.
Man, whereas like, honestly, for me, I am so fascinated by people's interpretation of my art. Sure. Like, I would love, I just want people to tell me what they see. Because everyone I've spoken to about my work who has, like, encountered it, like, I'm always surprised. Like, I'm always surprised. When I talked to you about my one book, the way you saw it, I was like, whoa, interesting. Like, the way you envisioned characters. And, like, when somebody else read my book and who had a Vietnam history, right? So they were an older person who had lived through Vietnam and had experiences with Vietnam vets and people who would, like, they thought that the whole book was my whole book was an incredibly dark psychology on a veteran losing his mind. And
if
it was like one
me,
of the
if I were to be one of these people, what I would do is if somebody wanted to know, I'd say, okay, explain to me what you think it means, and then I'll tell you. Because I'd want to know, minus my layering, what they saw.
I want to know first. Yeah, tell me what you think first.
That's what I would do. I would say, all right, send me an explanation of what you got out of it, and I will tell you what mine was. And then I'll tell you
what mine was, yeah.
And that would be great. And I would collect all of that into like a book.
Yeah, isn't that weird? Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I would do it.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, but overall, I think it's always good if you can have access to that, if you want it, and then you choose whether to use it or not. So I thought in that way, this book was excellent because it was right there and I was able to read it and it added a lot. So yeah, I'll try to excerpt that out and send it to you so you can read it because I think it is fascinating. So, and that is where we're at now because I've reviewed my 2 things and yeah.
I've reviewed nothing.
No, that's okay. You don't have to review anything. But so whatever you choose to entertain yourself with this weekend, hopefully it tells you what you want it to tell you or you bring to it what you want. So, yeah, Warriors or Goodbye 20th Century.
Oh, that's not
right
true.
Person.
I reviewed Ascent. I lied just now. I reviewed Ascent,
so, yeah. So there you go.
So just remember, folks, wherever you go,
there you are. All right. Have a great weekend, everybody. We will talk to you again next week. Visit OzoneNightmare.com to subscribe to new episodes, browse through our back catalog, or to find links to support the show. Follow @OzoneNightmare on Twitter for the latest episode postings and other show information. If 280 characters just isn't enough, you can always email us, theozonenightmare@gmail.com. The opening theme for the show is provided by Heartbeat Hero. The closing theme is provided by Ogre. Please visit and support these artists using the links in the show notes for each episode.